Chapter 401. It was already late at night. The sky was filled with stars, but the moon was nowhere to be seen. Over 6,000 meters above sea level on the Chaoyao Mountain, gusts of mountain wind blew in from afar. They whistled and rustled as they blew past the leaves, adding a unique charm to the dark night. Because of the high altitude and the night, the wind was very cold. It was enough to freeze an ordinary person to death. Even Chu Mu had no choice but to use his protective sword qi to isolate himself from the mountain wind. Popping sounds could be heard as the bonfire in front of Chu Mu burned fiercely. Sparks flew from the burning wood, and wisps of green smoke rose in spirals. When the mountain wind blew, they immediately dissipated without a trace. The flames were high and low, roasting the demonic beast meat. Golden oil dripped down and sizzled as it was roasted by the flames. Bursts of rich meat fragrance were carried away by the wind. In the distance, the occasional roar of a demonic beast could be heard, but it quickly quieted down. Chu Mu didn't pay attention to the demonic beast meat being roasted. Instead, he focused on the dark red dagger in his hand. Compared to the day, the dark red dagger no longer emitted any light. It was still the same dark red color as before. It didn't seem to have changed at all. However, Chu Mu felt that the aura of the dagger had changed. It was different from before. However, Chu Mu couldn't tell what exactly was different. He vaguely felt that if the dagger before was an inanimate object, then the dagger now had a trace of spirituality. It was as if it was alive. Sometimes, Chu Mu even felt that there was a life living inside the dagger. However, this kind of thought was too inconceivable. This was the first change to the dagger. The second change was that the two characters on the dagger had become very clear. Unfortunately, these were very ancient characters. Chu Mu didn't recognize them. He didn't know what they meant. Although he didn't recognize them, Chu Mu already knew what they meant. Azura. The reason he knew this was because the red light from the dark red sword had entered Chu Mu's mind and evolved into two pieces of information. This allowed Chu Mu to know what this dark red sword was. The first part of the message was that this thing came from the central main sword domain. It was something similar to a sword token from a sect. This sect was called the Shura Sword Sect. As for what kind of sect it was, the small sword's message did not clearly state. It only stated that if one brought this small sword to the Shura Sword Sect, they would be able to enter the Shura Sword Sect and become a sword sect disciple. This wasn't very attractive to Chu Mu. He just felt very surprised. The content of the second message was even shorter, but it set off a storm in Chu Mu's heart. The Azura Sword Sect was a sword Dao sect. If one entered the Azura Sword Sect as a disciple, they would have the opportunity to obtain the Azura Sword Dao inheritance. Sword Dao inheritance. So far, Chu Mu had only met less than 10 swordsmen who had inherited the way of the sword. Perhaps there were more, but he didn't know. However, only 2 of them had actually fought against each other. Xiao Qianfeng had inherited the boundless sword Dao. Ingjiani had inherited the 7 slaughter sword Dao. Within the great Kuan sword mansion, Chu Mu was sure that there were others who had also obtained the way of the sword Dao inheritance. It was just that he didn't know who they were. There were simply too few swordsmen who could obtain the way of the sword Dao inheritance. There might not even be one in 100,000 swordsmen. Similarly, once a swordsman obtained the way of the sword Dao inheritance, their future would be limitless. Their strength would also be much stronger than other swordsmen of the same level. Chu Mu, who had fought against Xiao Qianfeng and Ingjiani, also yearned for the so-called way of the sword Dao inheritance. However, according to the records of the sword Dao inheritors in the Eastern Sword Domain, most of them had gone out to train and obtained some sort of fortuitous encounter. Now, Chu Mu knew that there was actually a sword Dao sect in the central main sword domain that could give its disciples the opportunity to obtain the way of the sword Dao inheritance. Chu Mu was sure that within the Shura sword sect, there were definitely more than 1 or 2 swordsmen who had obtained the way of the sword Dao inheritance. This small sword was a great opportunity, but at the same time, it was also a hot potato. Once others knew that he had such an item, even Origin Realm swordsmen would attack him. To countless swordsmen, the central main sword domain was the birthplace of swordsmen. It was the holy land of swordsmen. A sword Dao sect that was called a Way of the Sword Dao sect was definitely very powerful. It might even surpass existences like the Great Kuan Sword Palace. If he could join it and strive to obtain the Way of the Shura Sword Dao inheritance, wouldn't he soar to the heavens? One had to know that many Origin Realm swordsmen opened their eyes wide, hoping that a pie would fall from the sky and obtain the Way of the Sword Dao inheritance. Chu Mu felt a surge of excitement in his heart. Right now, he would leave the Great Kuan dynasty, leave the Eastern Sword Domain, and head to the Central Main Sword Domain. He would join the Shura Sword sect and strive to obtain the Way of the Shura Sword Dao inheritance. The excitement in his heart was quickly suppressed by Chu Mu. In a short period of time, he regained his composure. Even Origin Realm swordsmen would be amazed by his mental fortitude. The journey to the Central Main Sword Domain was more than 10,000 miles. There were countless dangers along the way that could easily take one's life. With his mere Qi transformation realm cultivation, wanting to head to the Central Main Sword Domain was no different from a fantasy. Even Qi high swordsmen wouldn't dare to do so. Perhaps only those with the strength of a Sword Grand Master would be able to give it a try. Sword Grand Master. Chu Mu's eyes suddenly emitted an intense light. There seemed to be golden flames burning in his pupils. He was filled with an indomitable will to fight. His aura was extremely impassioned. The aura he emitted actually caused the flames in front of him to burn even more fiercely. With a flip of his hand, the dark red small sword disappeared. Chu Mu began to enjoy the delicious barbecued meat. In the Chaoyao Mountain, a moon-white figure flew past. That figure was as light as a feather. It was light and elegant. Its speed was also very fast. It flashed past like a bolt of lightning, leaving behind a faint white trace in the air. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. What was shocking was that this moon-white figure was constantly flying forward. However, it seemed to stop at the same spot for a moment. It gave people the illusion that the moon-white figure wasn't moving forward at all. Instead, it seemed to be walking on the same spot. It was very strange. In reality, the figure was moving forward at a speed as fast as the wind. Everything was just a visual illusion. With a flash, the moon-white figure floated down like a feather. It was also like an arrow that shot out. It suddenly stopped and landed on a protruding rock a few meters high. Only its long black hair danced in the wind. Its moon-white robe also fluttered in the wind. This person was Chu Mu. His eyes became deep and distant as he looked into the distance. The endless mountain forest stretched for tens of thousands of miles until it seemed to connect with the sky. The endless white clouds fluttered and changed unpredictably. Everything was reflected in his eyes. This is a footwork that combines the essence of the flashing wind movement technique, the wandering in the wind movement technique, and the phantom step. I'll name it the flying swan illusory step. Chu Mu said neither slowly nor quickly. It was as if he was talking to himself. His voice was so soft that only he could hear it. Back then, when he encountered the blood sword Fun Lai in the cave, after Chu Mu dodged Fun Lai's first attack, in a moment of desperation, his potential suddenly erupted. In a situation where even Chu Mu himself could not grasp it, he used the flashing wind movement technique, the wandering in the wind movement technique, and the phantom steps at the same time. It was indeed possible to use some different movement techniques at the same time, but the difficulty was very high. One had to completely grasp the essence of two different movement techniques in order to have a chance. There were even some different movement techniques that were basically opposite. If one wanted to use them at the same time, even if one had grasped the essence, it would not be possible. If one tried to forcefully fuse them, they might even hurt themselves. Normally, using 2 movement techniques and 1 movement technique at the same time was something that one did not even dare to think about. Only when one's life was in danger and there was only one thought left in one's heart would one's potential suddenly erupt. Only then would one be able to accomplish something that could be said to be impossible. With the first time, with Chu Mu's memory, he would naturally remember the feeling at that time. Then, relying on his monstrous perception, he would slowly trace it back to its roots and thoroughly understand its mysteries. From there, he would truly reach the point where the essence of 2 movement techniques and 1 movement technique could be fused together. This was a difficult process. Without a doubt, Chu Mu had crossed it and done it. The wandering in the wind movement technique was originally created by Chu Mu, so it was very easy to grasp its essence. The flashing wind movement technique was originally a high-level movement technique, but after being thoroughly understood by Chu Mu, it evolved into a super-level movement technique. The phantom steps was originally a high-level movement technique, but after evolving into a super-level movement technique, its essence was grasped by Chu Mu. All of these things had established the possibility of today. The Flying Swan Illusory Steps was a brand new movement technique, created by Chu Mu after fusing the essence of 2 movement techniques and 1 movement technique together with the concept of cloud. Not only did it have the lightness and elegance of the wandering in the wind movement technique, but it also had the speed of the flashing wind movement technique, the illusion of the phantom steps, and the unpredictability of the concept of clouds. With all of these characteristics combined, it created the miraculous mysteries of the Flying Swan Illusory Step. Although this was the first time Chu Mu had used the Flying Swan Illusory Steps, this movement technique was based on the wandering in the wind movement technique, the flashing wind movement technique, the phantom steps, and the concept of clouds. Chu Mu easily grasped it and used it skillfully, as if he had practiced it for many years. This Flying Swan Illusory Steps can currently be divided into 3 levels. Chu Mu carried the void sword on his back and looked into the distance with his hands behind his back. He muttered to himself, "The first level is to display the essence of 2 movement techniques and 1 movement technique from before. They complement each other and give people the illusion that they are not moving. At this level, I can be considered to have just started and have a basic grasp of it. I still need more time to completely master it. The second level should be to give people the illusion that they are advancing and retreating. It shouldn't be too difficult to master this level. As for the third level, that is where the real difficulty lies. Currently, I am only stuck at the setting." As soon as Chu Mu's voice left his mouth, it was instantly blown away by the mountain wind and disappeared without a trace in the forest. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 402. A group of people wearing long black robes came from afar and arrived at the demon-shaking city. None of them seemed to be old, the oldest of them being around 30 years old. The group of people gathered information as soon as they arrived at the demon-shaking city. Then, they left the city and entered the demon-shaking plains in group. The moon-white shadow was extremely light as a feather, but also as fast as the wind. When it moved, it gave people the feeling that it was not moving at all, as if it had the power to transform. The 3 black-robed sword artists opened their eyes wide, as if they had seen a ghost. Then, a cold light suddenly appeared beside them and turned into 3 stars. It was like a flower blooming. 3 blood-red flowers bloomed on the throats of the 3 black-robed sword artists. The 3 black-robed figures still had their eyes wide open as their bodies fell forward. Their movements were synchronized, as if they had rehearsed it before. The power of the Flying Swan Illusory Steps is indeed extraordinary. The air-speed sword drew out a sword flower and blood splashed in the air. Putting the sword back into its scabbard, Chu Mu glanced at the 3 dead bodies in front of him and said softly, "These 3 black-robed sword artists all had the sword chi of the beginning chi high realm. If it was before, Chu-Mu could definitely kill them one-on-one, but it would not be that fast, not to mention one-on-three. Now, Chu-Mu could do it. On one hand, it was because his power had increased, and on the other hand, it was because of the flying swan illusory step. Chu-Mu didn't know how to define this footwork technique's rank, because footwork techniques were only defined up to the super rank. After the super rank, there was no definition. It wasn't that he didn't want to define it, but that there were very few footwork techniques after the super rank. The flying swan illusory steps was supported by 70% of the poetic perspective of one cloud. Especially after Chu-Mu had mastered the first level, it was even more mysterious and unpredictable. The three beginning Chi High Realm sword artists could not react in time. His movements were fast and practiced. Chu-Mu found some soul stones from the bodies of the three beginning Chi High Realm sword artists. He did not even let go of their top-rank swords. These three swordsmen were all disciples of the Mora sword sect. Up to now, 4 core disciples of the Mora sword sect had died at the hands of Chu-Mu. From what the 3 core disciples of the Moro sword sect said, Chu-Mu learned that his ranking on the Moro sword sect's core mission board had risen again, and so had his bounty. Many of the Moro sword sect's core disciples were tempted to accept the mission and come to Demon Shaker City. Furthermore, they also knew that Chu-Mu was an inner palace disciple of the great Koan sword mansion. This made the core disciples of the Moro sword sect want to kill him even more. Chu-Mu was not surprised that his identity was exposed. After all, the Moro sword sect was a powerful sect that could rival the great Koan sword palace. Their intelligence network was naturally not weak. It was natural that they would be able to find out his identity. 2 Dashang Chi High Warriors, 8 Low Chi High Warriors, and 15 Early Chi High Warriors. The Moro sword sect, what a powerful group! Chu-Mu looked away from the 3 corpses below him and looked into the distance. His eyes became deep as he muttered to himself. His tone was filled with sadness, and then killing intent. His eyes were shining like gems, and a sharp light was swirling in them. His killing intent was overflowing, and it shot up into the sky. 3, there are still 22 left. Just wait for me to come and take your lives. His body moved again, and he turned into a swan in the sky, flying away like a wind. A sharp sound was heard, and it sounded like a long siren. A red light shot up into the sky and stopped a few hundred meters away. The sharp sound also stopped. Then, the fist-sized red light exploded and turned into hundreds of red light spots, shooting out in all directions like shooting stars. They were shining brightly for dozens of meters. At that moment, it was like a huge blooming firework. It was like the sun shining down on the earth. Even if one was 10,000 meters away, they could still see it clearly. This was a signal flare. It was a way for the disciples of the Moro sword sect to notify the other disciples of the sect. Chu-Mu, you won't be able to escape. 9 Chi High Realm beginner swordsmen formed a circle and surrounded Chu-Mu. If it was 1 against 3, Chu-Mu was confident that he could kill them all in an instant, just like before. But 1 against 9, Chu-Mu was not confident. Therefore, he was thinking quickly. But these guys only formed a circle and surrounded him without attacking. Instead, they sent out a signal flare to summon the other disciples of the Moro sword sect. They wanted to kill him as soon as possible. Glancing at them, Chu-Mu immediately used his flying swan illusionary step. His body lightly dashed to the side. In the eyes of the 9 Chi High Realm sword artists, his body seemed to have not moved at all. He stayed in the same spot, but he seemed to have moved again. He was extremely fast and light, and his movements were unpredictable. All in all, it was a contradiction. It looked very contradictory, and it made them feel uncomfortable. Their eyes were filled with confusion. Then, thousands of broken light spots appeared in front of them. The broken light spots were everywhere, making them feel like they were in a river of stars. In the next moment, the thousands of broken light spots started to flow like water. In the blink of an eye, they sped up and formed a circle. It was like the Milky Way was reversing. The eyes of the 9mo Luo sword sect Chi high warriors became even more confused. Their eyes reflected the countless broken stars. These stars were still spinning around, as if they were trapped within them. They couldn't tell which direction was north or south, and they were lost in it. Suddenly, among the thousands of broken light spots, 9 of them emitted a sharp light. The light spots were extremely bright. They were like 9 swords piercing towards the throats of the 9 Chi high warriors. Each of the swords had a clear trajectory. It looked like a straight line, but in reality, it contained the power of thousands of changes. It was as if the swords would disappear in a second and turn into other light spots, making it hard for people to dodge. With a swooshing sound, the 9 sword-like bright starlight pierced into the throats of the 9 Chi high realm warriors. In the next moment, the starlight in the sky disappeared. A gust of wind blew past, and the 9 warriors fell back onto the ground in unison. On each of their throats, there was a blooming flower of blood. Their eyes were filled with confusion. Even when they died, they did not know how they were killed. Chumu's face was pale. It was not because he had killed someone, but because he had used up too much of his sword chi. At that moment, he had concentrated all his chi and performed the first move of the Broken Star sword art, Broken Star Shine, and the second move, Broken Star Spin. After a few months, Chumu had finally mastered the first move of the Broken Star sword art, Broken Star Shine, to the level of Deshang. After that, Deshang started to practice the second move, Broken Star Spin. Shattering Star Spin was even more mysterious than Shattering Star Brilliance, so it was naturally more difficult to train. If it weren't for the fact that the Shattering Star Sword Art's 3 great sword techniques were all linked together, and that the second technique used the first technique as a foundation, Chumu would probably have to spend several times more time to learn it. Even so, Chumu had only barely reached the small success stage of Broken Star Brilliance. Fighting 1 against 9, even if he used guerrilla tactics, it would still take him a long time to kill them all. During this time, the other Chi high swordsman from the Mo Luo sword sect would arrive and he would be in danger. Therefore, Chumu decided to use the most decisive and ruthless method. He used the power of wind and thunder to sweep through the area and kill these 9 beginner Chi high realm sword artists in the shortest amount of time. This way, he would have some time to recover and prepare for the next battle. The path of a swordsman was filled with life and death. In an instant, Chumu used Flying Swan illusory steps and then used Shattering Star Brilliance and Shattering Star Spin. Moreover, he displayed 120% of the power of these 2 great sword techniques. This consumed an incomparably large amount of his mental energy and sword aura. After killing 9 people in one go, Chumu also became weak for a short while. Although he was weak, Chumu did not fall down. He stood straight with the Speed Sky sword in his hand. His whole body was straight like a sharp sword piercing into the sky. He kept on using the 9 transformations of heaven to recover his sword chi. The surrounding Ling chi quickly gathered from afar and turned into gusts of wind. With Chumu as the center, the Ling chi quickly poured into Chumu's body. After the Ling chi entered his meridians, it started to move quickly along the 9 transformations of heaven. After the Desolation transformation, the meridians were very strong. Even if the sword chi of heaven was moving at 10 times the speed, it would still be able to move. Chumu kept on moving the sword chi of heaven, causing it to move faster and faster. Like hundreds of rivers flowing into the sea, countless Ling Chi rushed into Chumu's pores and into his meridians. The Ling Chi continued to move at a high speed along with the sword Chi of heaven. The Ling Chi in the Chaoyao mountain was very rich. At the same time, the Yao Chi was also very rich. When Chumu absorbed the Ling Chi into his body, a part of the Yao Chi also entered his meridians. This was what most of the swordsmen were worried about. As everyone knew, the Ling Chi was gentle. The Yao Chi was very violent because of its demonic power. Furthermore, the Yao Qi and Ling Qi were incompatible. Once they entered the meridians of a swordsman, the violent Yao Qi would clash with the swordsman's sword Qi. This conflict also began to manifest in Chu Mu's meridians. Fortunately, there wasn't enough demonic aura and it was easily dispersed by Chu Mu's heavenly Yuan sword Qi. Adding on the fact that Chu Mu's meridians were incomparably tough, the collision between demonic aura and heavenly Yuan sword Qi was unable to damage Chu Mu's meridians. On the contrary, when the sword Qi and the Yao Qi collided, the Yao Qi was like a fiery hammer, and the sword Qi was like a sword embryo. Every collision was like a fiery hammer hitting the sword embryo. Chu Mu could feel that the sword Qi of heaven was becoming purer at a speed that he could feel. Chu Mu forgot about the outside world and immersed himself in it. The feeling of constantly recovering and purifying his sword Qi was exhilarating and incomparable. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was to purify his sword Qi to the point of breaking through the 9th transformation of heaven origin. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 403. Junior Apprentice Brother. These were the core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect who had rushed over when they saw the signal flare. When they saw the 9 corpses with their heads facing outwards and their feet facing inwards, they were all furious. These 9 corpses were not related to them by blood. In the Mo Luo sword sect, they could be considered as competitors. But this time, they had formed a team and came to the Yao Yao city to complete a mission, which was to capture Chu Mu, an inner house disciple of the great Kuan Sword Palace. Therefore, they were now on the same side and had a common enemy. Not to mention, their apprentice brothers had died in the hands of an outsider, who was the target of their mission. This made them even more furious. How dare you stay here after killing someone? Kill him and avenge our apprentice brothers. A Qi High warrior shouted angrily. He pulled out his sword and was about to kill Chu Mu on the spot. Stop. One of the 2 Qi High warriors of the Deshang sword sect immediately pulled out his sword and blocked the attack. Senior apprentice brother, this is one of our apprentice brothers, the Qi High warrior said with a face full of grief. Yes, he is one of our apprentice brothers. But don't forget, our goal is to complete the mission. The Qi High warrior of the Deshang sword sect said coldly. The other Qi High warrior of the Deshang sword sect also nodded in agreement and added, the reward for killing Chu Mu and capturing Chu Mu is 3 times the reward. 3 times. The other core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect suddenly became silent. That's right, their goal was to complete the mission and get the reward. After completing the mission, the rewards they received would be distributed according to the previously agreed upon ratio. The greater the final reward, the greater the reward each of them would receive. Taking a step back and thinking about it, the more people who died, the more rewards they would receive in the end. Thinking of this, the grief and indignation in his heart dissipated like smoke. Senior brother, this guy was able to kill 9 of our junior brothers. His strength is not normal. He is much stronger than we thought. The Lo Qi High sword warrior put his sword back into its scabbard and stared at Chu Mu. He frowned and said, he is indeed extraordinarily powerful. However, the current him does not have the slightest ability to resist. This is the best opportunity to attack him. As soon as he finished speaking, the core disciples of the Moro sword sect all rushed toward Chu Mu. In the blink of an eye, they had crossed tens of meters and were closing in on Chu Mu. In the next moment, Chu Mu would fall into their hands. His dantian would be sealed, and he would be completely powerless to resist. In the end, he would be brought back to the Moro sword sect and become their mission subject. Suddenly, Chu Mu opened his eyes. 2 beams of cold light shot out like 2 sharp swords towards the crowd. At that moment, the 2 Lo Qi High sword warriors, the 8 Lo Qi High sword warriors, and the 3 Lo Qi High sword warriors felt their hearts skip a beat. Then, a powerful sword aura shot out from Chu Mu's body and soared into the sky. In their eyes, Chu Mu's body seemed to have expanded by 10 times. He was like a huge sword pointing towards the sky, releasing an endless amount of sharpness. This was the peak of Deshang's sword aura. It was released without Chu Mu's control and turned into a sharp sword that looked like it was going to pierce through the sky. This was the peak of Deshang's sword aura. After being polished by the aura of the previous Origin Realm warriors, it had become even sharper and smoother. It seemed like it was going to break through Deshang's sword aura and reach completion. None of the Chi-High sword warriors present had this kind of sword aura. But today, it appeared on a peak Chi transforming realm sword warrior. How could they not be shocked? All of a sudden, they all had the same thought. This person had to kill someone or else there would be endless trouble. Chu Mu suddenly soared into the sky. The sword aura wings on his back opened up and flapped. He turned into a white light and flew down the disorderly demon mountain. Then, the sword aura wings became even thinner and longer. They were like sharp blades as they vibrated at a high speed. With one vibration, Chu Mu's speed increased by a few times. Like a flash of white lightning, he traveled thousands of meters in an instant. The second level of the sky traversing secret art, soaring to the sky. At that moment, Chu Mu performed soaring to the sky 3 times in a row. There was not much sword aura left in his dantian. He also used the soaring to the sky secret art to appear more than 10,000 meters away, leaving the core disciples of the Moro sword sect far behind. In just a moment, Chu Mu disappeared in front of their eyes. How unbelievable was that? Chu Mu was secretly glad. With his strength, he was not a match for these people. If he fought, only death would await him. Therefore, he had to use some tricks. At that time, he finally broke through to the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of heaven. Just like what was written in the 9 transformations of heaven, once he reached the 9th transformation, the quantity and purity of his sword aura would increase by 50%. In other words, right now, Chu Mu's sword aura quantity and purity was no less than a normal Chi-High realm sword artist. It might even be better than him. In terms of strength, Chu Mu could easily kill a normal Chi-High realm sword artist, but he was still not a match for these people. Therefore, when they attacked, Chu Mu released the peak of Deshang's sword aura, which shocked these sword artists. No matter if it was the shock or the shock from the sword aura, it would cause them to stop for a moment. This pause was the perfect time for Chu Mu to escape. Chase after him. I'd rather bring his corpse back than let him escape. 2 Deshang realm sword artists shouted together. They were full of killing intent. They immediately used their flying secret arts and opened their sword aura wings, chasing after Yi Chen. Chase! The other Chi-High realm sword artists also shouted. Their killing intent increased as they opened their sword aura wings and chased after Yi Chen. This kind of person would definitely be able to become a sword master in the future. He could not be left alive, or else he would be a huge threat. After rushing out for 10,000 meters, Chu Mu landed on the ground and retracted his sword aura wings. It's time to break through, Chu Mu said softly. His voice was carried away by the wind in the forest. He slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, the 13 core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect had also caught up. They were only a few thousand meters away from Chu Mu. This kind of distance could be covered in 10 breaths. All of a sudden, the Ling Qi in the surroundings seemed to be boiling. The Yao Qi and the Ling Qi were in turmoil. There was a strong wind blowing from all directions, forming gusts of wind. From left to right, from right to left, the gusts of wind collided with each other and exploded, forming a cyclone. The clouds in the sky seemed to be affected as well. They were moving faster and faster, as if they were being stirred up by an invisible hand. The wind was blowing and the clouds were moving. The wind became even more violent, causing the trees in the mountains to rustle. The fist-sized rocks were also rolling around, as if they were being swept up by the storm. This is the core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect, who were less than 1,000 meters away from Chu Mu, all had a change in expression. Kill him now, we cannot let him break through. They were all experienced and knowledgeable. They immediately recognized that Chu Mu was in the middle of breaking through. Breaking through what? Breaking through to the Qi High Realm. Chu Mu, who was at the peak of the Qi transforming realm, was already hard for them to deal with. If he broke through to the Qi High Realm, then his power would increase exponentially and he would be even harder to deal with. At that time, they would not be able to do anything to him. Now that he has just broken through and has not formed his Qi Si, let's kill him now. All of a sudden, the 13 Qi High Realm warriors attacked with all of their strength. They gathered all of the Qi around them into one sword and shot out 13 different colored but extremely bright sword light. Each sword light was at least 10 meters long, some even reached 20 meters. They were like meteorites falling from the sky, shooting towards Chu Mu. The distance was too far. If they used their ancient sword arts, they would not be able to make it in time. Without any other choice, the 13 core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect had to use most of their sword Qi and poetic realm to gather all of the Qi around them to attack Chu Mu. The 13 huge sword lights shot towards Yichen like lightning. They were filled with killing intent and directly shattered many of the Qi cyclones. Within 3 breaths, the 13 huge sword lights would definitely travel hundreds of meters and hit Chu Mu, killing Chu Mu completely. However, Chu Mu did not seem to feel anything, or he was not worried at all. He closed his eyes and spread out his consciousness to touch the Qi around him, the world outside his body, and the heaven and earth around him. The 13 core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect all stared at the 13 sword lights. They were extremely nervous. They hoped that the 13 sword lights would be able to kill Chu Mu in one hit. Otherwise, when they reached Chu Mu and were about to attack, they would lose the best chance to attack. Sharp and terrifying sounds of wind splitting rang out incessantly, causing one's scalp to go numb. Although the 13 terrifying sword rays had their power reduced by more than half due to traversing a few hundred meters, once they hit Chu Mu, they were still able to instantly break through Chu Mu's protective sword aura. Even the feather-patterned armor on his body couldn't block them. The 13 sword lights were less than 50 meters away from Chu Mu. In the blink of an eye, the 13 sword lights would definitely hit Chu Mu. In the blink of an eye, the spirit aura and demonic aura around Chu Mu's body began to revolve. Streaks of air turned gray and were clearly visible. They were like streams of water that wrapped around Chu Mu. Circle after circle, they surrounded Chu Mu. The 13 sword lights slashed at the rapidly spinning grayish-white streams of Qi. The streams of Qi paused for a moment before exploding under the attack of the sword lights. However, the Qi around the streams of Qi immediately replenished them, turning into a new grayish-white stream of Qi that once again wrapped around Chu Mu. The grayish-white stream of Qi seemed to be endless. Under the constant attack, the 13 sword lights shattered like they were crushed by a millstone. They were sucked into the grayish-white stream of Qi and became a part of it, wrapping around Chu Mu. Condensed Qi-like stream, protect yourself. The expressions of the 13 core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect who had rushed over became extremely ugly. Their faces were so gloomy that it seemed like water was about to drip from them. Their eyes were filled with anger and hatred. A difference of 1 step. Just a difference of 1 step and they lost the chance to kill Chu Mu on the spot. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 404. Condense the Qi like a stream, protect yourself. This was the phrase that every sword practitioner would use when they break through to the Qi High Realm. When a sword practitioner breaks through to the Qi Transformation Realm from the half-step Qi Transformation Realm, they need to communicate with the heavens and earth. To put it bluntly, it's not that mysterious. It's just communicating with the spirit qi around your body and refining your body from the inside to the outside. From then on, you can absorb the spirit qi outside your body to train and transform it into your own sword qi. When a sword practitioner reaches this stage, their spirit qi will become more vigorous, and to a certain extent, there will be a qualitative change. It's also not like a sword practitioner who needs to eat to maintain the strength of their body and train. Of course, if there's good food, no qi transformation realm sword practitioner will refuse it. Qi transformation is to transform the spirit qi outside your body into your own sword qi. This is the essence of the qi transformation realm. The qi high realm and the qi transformation realm have some similarities, but also some differences. For sword practitioners, the qi high realm is the realm after the qi transformation realm. It's a realm higher than the qi transformation realm. It can be said that the qi high realm is a development of the qi transformation realm. For the same reason, the qi high realm is the same as the qi transformation realm. It can even be said that it's an extension of the qi transformation realm. It's like going from a low level to a high level. The qi high realm's ability to absorb spirit qi far surpasses the qi transformation realm. For example, when a sword practitioner breaks through to the qi transformation realm, they can create a spirit qi whirlpool that's 50 or 100 meters wide. When they break through to the qi high realm, they will also create a spirit qi whirlpool, but the range will be 10 times larger, reaching 500 or 1,000 meters. Think about it. A spirit qi whirlpool that's at least a few hundred meters wide will contain 10 times more spirit qi than when breaking through to the qi transformation realm. It's so dense that it can be seen with the naked eye. From afar, it's like a sea of spirit qi, a sea of spirit qi that's many times smaller. That's how the qi high realm got its name. Not only that, after breaking through to the qi high realm, one would gain the ability to manipulate the ling qi outside their body to attack or defend. This was something that qi-forming sword artists did not have. Of course, manipulating the spirit qi outside of one's body was not easy. Usually, a sword artist who had just broken through to the qi high level would not be able to master this ability. They would need to practice for a period of time before they could master this ability. Furthermore, when he had just grasped it, the proportion of spirit energy he could mobilize was very low and limited. Only swordsmen with extraordinary talent could mobilize more spirit energy. At this moment, Chu Mu was in the process of breaking through. Once he was done, he would be a qi high swordsman. Streaks of grayish-white air currents wrapped around his body like flowing water. They seemed to be trapping Chu Mu, but in reality, they formed layers of protection for Chu Mu. The reason why Chu Mu chose to break through here was because he was confident, extremely confident. Before this, he had already understood the things that he had to pay attention to when breaking through to the qi high level. Among them, there was a record of condensing qi into a stream to protect oneself. In order to break through to the qi high level, one had to first manipulate one's mental energy and abandon all distracting thoughts. Gradually, one would come into contact with the spirit qi outside of one's body and form a resonance with it. Intentionally or unintentionally, the spirit qi around one's body would be manipulated. The result of manipulating the spirit qi was to form streaks of air around one's body. This was the so-called condensing qi into a stream. It formed a protective barrier and protected one's body. It didn't matter if you were a person with poor talent or a person with extraordinary talent. When breaking through to the qi high level, you had to go through this step. Chu Mu's air currents were grayish-white. Because this was the Chaoyao Mountains, there was not only spirit qi but also yao qi. When the two were mixed together, manipulating the spirit qi would naturally affect the yao qi as well. This was not a problem at all. On the contrary, with the addition of the yao qi, the power of the condensing qi into a stream increased. After all, the yao qi was a few times more violent than the spirit qi. The 13 core disciples of the Moro sword sect all had gloomy faces. They gritted their teeth and their eyes were filled with killing intent. They stared at the grayish-white air currents as if they were trying to see through the grayish-white air currents and see Chu Mu. Unfortunately, they didn't have the ability to see through things. "Senior brother, what do we do now?" A low Chi High warrior looked at the two sword Deshang warriors and asked in a deep voice. "Condensing Chi into a stream to protect oneself. Unless it is a sword master, even if all 13 of us attack together, we will not be able to do anything to those air currents," one of the sword Deshang warriors said in a deep voice. He was filled with anger and unwillingness. Indeed, the grayish-white air currents outside of Chu Mu's body were very powerful. Of course, if it was only one air current, they would still be able to destroy it if they attacked with all their strength. However, the problem was that there was not only one air current or 10 air currents, there were dozens of them. The edges of each grayish-white airflow were like sawtooth waves, or like a slowed-down electric saw. Dozens of them were like dozens of small flood dragons. These grayish-white airflows flowed in opposite directions. In this way, even if there was a tyrannical attack, it would be weakened by the high-speed flow of the grayish-white airflow and eventually be destroyed. The spirit Qi and Yao Qi in the surroundings were endless. Once the grayish-white air currents were used up, they would immediately be replenished. Therefore, the most effective way to deal with them was to use one attack to tear apart the air currents and attack Chu Mu. Unfortunately, they did not have the ability to do so. Just like what the sword Deshang warrior said, only a sword master would be able to do so. Of course, if an Origin Realm sword master were to attack, he would be able to easily break through the protection of the grayish-white air currents and kill the person inside. At this moment, the spirit aura that was converging from all directions had become very clear. Streams of spirit aura mixed with demonic aura became grayish-white and charged towards Chu Mu like conscious noodles. The spirit Qi became denser and denser. Gradually, the outline of a spirit Qi whirlpool formed in the air above Chu Mu. After 10 breaths, under the gaze of the 13 Moro sword sect disciples, the spirit Qi whirlpool became denser and denser. Because of the Yao Qi, it also showed a faint grayish-white color. As time passed, the spirit Qi whirlpool continued to expand, and the faint grayish-white color also deepened bit by bit. The wind howled and was extremely cold. Some of the branches of the trees in the Chaoyao Mountains were broken, and many fist-sized rocks were blown into the sky by the wind. The huge storm was raging, and rumbling sounds could be heard. The originally clear sky was now dark and gloomy, as if a storm was coming. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. The atmosphere was gloomy and oppressive, making it difficult for people to even breathe. They felt as if there was a stone in their chest. We have 2 choices now. First, we can stay and wait for Chu Mu to finish his breakthrough. By then, he will have reached the beginning of the Qi High Realm, and his ability will increase significantly. It will be much more difficult for us to capture him alive, and even killing him will not be easy. One of the Qi High sword Deshang warriors tried to keep his breathing steady and said in a deep voice, "Although it is difficult, it is not impossible. He has just broken through and is not familiar with the power of the Qi High Realm. He will not be able to use the true power of the Qi High Realm. But if we work together, we will be able to fight or even kill a peak Qi High Realm sword master." As soon as he finished speaking, his words were immediately blown away by the storm. As he spoke, he had to use more and more strength, and in the end, he was almost shouting. "Second, we can leave right now and go back to the faction to report this matter. By then, the level of the mission will be increased, and the rewards will also be increased. But if we go back and forth, I am afraid that Chu Mu has already mastered the essence of the Qi High Realm and is able to use the full power of the Qi High Realm. If we accept this mission, we may not be able to take him down." The Qi High Realm sword Deshang warrior shouted again. "This mission is a joint mission, and I cannot make the decision for you. So, come up with your own decision. The minority obeys the majority." At this moment, the other sword masters were all silent. Their minds were quickly working to analyze the situation and come up with a decision. At this moment, the wind was getting stronger and stronger. The rocks on the ground were rolling quickly, and many trees were uprooted and flew into the sky. It was as if a level 12 typhoon was coming. The 13 Chi High Realm sword masters had to back off because the storm was too strong. Even they felt as if their bodies were being blown into the sky. Only Chu Mu did not move. At this moment, he had already forgotten about everything that was happening around him. He was completely immersed in his own mental world. The spirit chi and monster chi in the surroundings mixed together and continuously entered Chu Mu's body. With the 9 rotation cycles of heaven origin, the spirit chi was constantly being converted into pure sword chi. The sword chi collided with the monster chi again and again. Luckily, Chu Mu's meridians were very strong, and this kind of collision did not cause any burden to Chu Mu's meridians. On the contrary, after repeated collisions, Chu Mu's heavenly yuan sword chi became even purer. On the mental level, Chu Mu once again entered the state of emptiness. This state was very rare, and could only be entered when breaking through to the next realm. Just like when a sword master broke through from the half-step Qi transformation realm to the Qi transformation realm, there was a certain chance that a sword master could enter the state of emptiness. Then, when breaking through to the Qi high realm, there was also a certain chance that a sword master could enter the state of Deshang. The duration of the emptiness state was closely related to the strength of one's soul. The stronger one's soul was, the longer the emptiness state could last. Chu Mu took the opportunity to comprehend the sword force first. His sword force had already reached the peak of Deshang and was faintly becoming more rounded. This was a sign that he was about to break through to perfection. And now, in this state of emptiness, Chu Mu only needed to comprehend a little, and he was able to break through the bottleneck of the sword force and reach perfection. Sword force perfection. Chu Mu immediately felt that the sword force was flowing smoothly and smoothly. It was much easier than before. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 405. A loud sound echoed throughout the sky. 1,000-meter-long spirit chi whirlpool appeared above Chu Mu, spinning slowly. This spirit chi whirlpool was gray and white. It was like a huge millstone spinning, as if it was going to destroy everything. Anyone who looked at it could feel the power of the heavens. It was unstoppable. Rumbling sounds continued to erupt from the huge grayish-white spirit chi vortex. Rays of light flickered within the spirit chi vortex. Those were thunderbolts wreaking havoc like flood dragons. That was because the spirit chi and demonic chi were too dense, constantly producing electric currents due to the friction and collisions. Countless electric currents gathered to form bolts of lightning and thunder, wreaking havoc in the spirit chi vortex, full of terrifying power. The enormous and heavy spirit aura whirlpool was like a huge mountain. Under this extremely frightening mountain, Chu Mu's figure was nowhere to be seen. There were only a few dozen dragon-like grayish-white streams of air that constantly revolved around him, ignoring the violent hurricane. Some trees and rocks were blown away by the strong winds and were smashed into the spirit chi whirlpools. They were instantly destroyed by the spirit chi whirlpools and disappeared without a trace. Even if it was 10,000 meters away, it would still be affected. A 1,000-meter-long spirit chi whirlpool. Scary, this person's talent is really scary. Die, he must die. Another Chi High warrior said as he coldly stared at the Ling Chi whirlpool in the sky. His eyes were filled with fear. I have already made up my mind. I will stay here and kill him with everything I have after he breaks through. Although he said that, if the others did not stay, he would not have the confidence to kill him alone. So he turned around and looked at the others. Brother is right, this person's talent is too scary. Once he grows up, he will be a disaster. If we can kill him today, we must. A Chi High Sword warrior said firmly. I have decided to stay. I have decided to stay too. I think it is better for me to leave, I am not confident. Suddenly, a Chi High Sword warrior made a different decision. In the end, the 13 core disciples of the Moro Sword Martial School all made their own decisions. 10 of them decided to stay and take advantage of this opportunity to kill Chu Mu, while the other 3 thought that they were not confident enough to stay. However, they had previously agreed that the minority would obey the majority. Since the 10 of them had decided to stay, the 3 who had decided to leave had to stay as well. They would work together to kill Chu Mu, even if the reward for the mission would be reduced. The madly blowing wind finally weakened little by little, and the color of the huge millstone-like whirlpool of spiritual energy in the sky was also rapidly fading. This meant that Chu Mu's breakthrough was nearing its end. The 13 core disciples of the Moro Sword sect all held their breath. They were all excited and full of killing intent. A swordsman like Chu Mu could be called a genius, the kind that others envied. Being a genius did not necessarily mean having a high level of training talent. Being able to surpass normal people in a certain aspect could also be called a genius. Like Chu Mu, who was able to trigger a 1,000-meter-wide whirlpool of spiritual energy in just one breakthrough, he was definitely worthy of being called a genius. Not to mention that he was able to kill 9 Chi High Realm warriors with his peak level of Chi shaping Realm Sword Chi, and also had Deshang's peak level Sword Chi. If he was not a genius, then what was he? Not to mention that according to the information they had, this Chu Mu was not even 20 years old. As long as a person like him did not die, once he grew up, there was a high chance that he would be able to become a sword hero. In the future, he would definitely be able to reach the origin realm. If this person was a disciple of the Moro Sword sect, not only would they not attack him, they would even protect him. Unfortunately, this person was not a disciple of the Moro Sword sect. Since he was not a disciple of the Moro Sword sect, and was being hunted down by the Moro Sword sect's core disciple mission, he would definitely hate the Moro Sword sect. It was not a good thing to be hated by such a person. Therefore, the only way to do it was to kill him before he truly matured to prevent future troubles. All 13 of them were filled with killing intent. Each of them held onto the hilt of their swords. Their eyes were shining brightly, filled with killing intent. They were waiting for everything to calm down before they made their move to kill Chu Mu. The huge spiritual energy whirlpool in the sky had turned into a light gray color. Its spinning speed was getting slower and slower, and it was becoming unstable. It was as if it would disappear with a single blow of wind. The storm that was raging around Chu Mu had also turned into a strong wind. The dozens of gray chi streams that were surrounding Chu Mu had also started to fade away. All of this meant that Chu Mu's breakthrough was about to end. He was about to lose the protection of the condensed chi stream, protect self. When the time came, he would be exposed in front of 13 wolves like a weak little lamb. However, it was hard to say who was the weak little lamb and who was the wolf. Let's get close first. Get ready and wait for my command. One of the Chi High swordsmen said in a low voice. Then, the 13 Chi High swordsmen started to move forward. Every one of them walked very softly, as if they were afraid that Chu Mu would hear them. They all held their breaths and stared at the gray chi streams that were slowly disappearing. Behind the chi streams, a human figure could be seen. Move! A deep voice suddenly exploded. It was like thunder. One could hear the killing intent and excitement in the voice. It was the kind of excitement that would make one's hair stand on end. 13 sounds of swords being pulled out echoed in the air. 13 cold sword light were like ripples in the autumn water, releasing a strong killing intent. The 13 swords all swung forward. Their sword chi and mental state were all infused into the swords, causing the swords to emit different colored light. Then, the surrounding chi started to move. It was like an invisible hand was grabbing at the swords, forcefully gathering the chi on each of the swords, causing each of the swords to emit a bright light. The 13 sword lights once again sliced through the air. They were dozens of meters away from each other, and their power was even stronger than before. The sharp sound of the swords tearing through the air was ear-piercing. Wherever the 13 different colored sword lights went, the ground would be cut open. It was dozens of meters long, and the rocks were as fragile as tofu. The gray chi streams that were about to disappear played their last role. They blocked the 13 sword lights for a bit and then disappeared in the blink of an eye like smoke being blown away by a strong wind. The dozens of grayish-white air streams were all shattered, turning into grayish-white smoke that spread out in all directions. The 13 terrifying sword lights disappeared into the grayish-white smoke. The 13 Chi-Hai swordsmen all opened their eyes wide and stared at the scene with full concentration. Normally, a Chi-Hai swordsman who had just broken through to the Chi-Hai realm would be severely injured even if he didn't die. In the next moment, a series of explosions were heard and turned into a terrifying circular shockwave. It was like a rolling wave, and it immediately dispersed the gray smoke. A strong wind blew towards them, causing the sand and rocks to fly. The 13 Chi-Hai swordsmen couldn't help but cover their faces with their hands. Through the gaps between their fingers, they saw a figure standing straight between the sky and the ground. It was like a great sword pointing towards the sky, piercing through the clouds. The sharpness of the sword was unparalleled. "He is not dead." A scream filled with shock was heard in the forest. It almost made some of the beasts that were giving birth to their offspring weak on the spot. "Kill him at all costs." A shout filled with anger and fear was heard. Immediately after, the 13 Chi-Hai swordsmen attacked again. The 13 ancient sword arts were not held back at all. The wind was howling, the thunder was rumbling, the rocks were cracking, the waves were surging, and the fire was burning the sky. Within 100-meter radius, everything was covered by the 13 ancient sword arts. Wherever the ancient sword arts went, the ground cracked, the rocks shattered, and the land was scorched. In order to kill Chu-Mu, the 13 core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect were giving it their all. They did not hold back at all. The power of their combined attacks was enough to kill even a Chi-Hai swordsman. The strong killing intent was enough to freeze people's blood. As the target, Chu-Mu was the first to bear the brunt of the killing intent. All of a sudden, Chu-Mu's body shook as if he was standing still in the same spot, receiving the attacks of the 13 Chi-Hai swordsmen. However, Chu-Mu's real body had already rushed towards the 13 Chi-Hai swordsmen. His expression was calm, but his eyes were full of fighting intent. His pupils reflected the 13 ancient sword art. The trajectory of the ancient sword arts was clearly shown in Chu-Mu's eyes. The mysteries of the ancient sword arts were also revealed. The Speed Sky sword was drawn out of its scabbard like lightning. In a second, the Speed Sky sword turned into 13 stars and flew out like shooting stars. Its speed was as fast as lightning and as fast as light. This sword attack was formed by the Sky Yuan sword chi, the ripping mentality, and 1% of the perfect sword force. It followed the trajectory of the 13 ancient sword arts and avoided colliding with their sword. It went straight towards the throats of the 13 Chi-Hai swordsmen. The 13 Chi-Hai swordsmen were shocked. Their scalps went numb, and they quickly changed their sword attacks to counter the attack. Chi-chi-chi, 3 light sounds were heard. It made the 2 Chi-Hai swordsmen deshang and the 8 low Chi-Hai swordsmen shiver. That sound was the sound of a sword piercing into a person's flesh. The 13 stars disappeared. Chu-Mu's body was like the wind, but also as light as a swan. He also brought with him the unpredictable changes of the white clouds in the sky, making it impossible for the swordsman to catch him. The Speed Sky sword appeared and disappeared like a ghost. 10 more stars appeared in front of the 10 Chi-Hai swordsmen again. The stars suddenly exploded and turned into hundreds and thousands of stars. At that moment, the swordsmen were in the middle of the Milky Way. Their eyes reflected the countless stars. In their eyes, the stars were everywhere. Every star was shining brightly, and every star was sharp and sharp, like the tip of a sword. In front of the 10 Qi high swordsman, Chu Mu's body disappeared. Only the stars were spinning and moving. In the blink of an eye, Chu Mu's body passed through the 10 Qi high swordsman. He stopped 20 meters away. The speed sky's sword was pointed towards the ground. On the tip of the sword, there was a drop of blood slowly dripping down. The 10 Qi high swordsmen had their backs facing Chu Mu. They all maintained the posture of charging forward and performing their sword attacks. It was as if they had turned into 10 statues. They did not move at all. After 3 breaths, the 10 Qi high swordsmen's bodies shook and they slowly fell forward. Bang! It was as if the sound resonated between heaven and earth. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 406. 13 corpses were lying on the ground, their blood staining the ground red. The smell of blood spread out and was blown away by the wind. Chu Mu stopped looking at the 13 corpses and stretched out his right hand. He opened his palm and bent his fingers as if he was grabbing onto something. A slight sound of wind was heard and wisps of Ling Qi quickly gathered from the surroundings like snakes gathering in his palm. In the blink of an eye, a Ling Qi whirlpool appeared in his palm. It kept spinning and was gray in color. It was a smaller version of the Ling Qi whirlpool from before. Qi Si in the palm. This was the symbol of a real Qi high sword artist. Just like the one-eyed dragon from before, although he was a Qi high sword artist, he had just broken through to the Qi high sword artist and did not have the ability to command the Ling Qi of heaven and earth. Therefore, the one-eyed dragon could not be considered a true Qi high realm swordsman. Only after a period of seclusion could he be considered a true Qi high realm swordsman. Unfortunately, he was too impulsive and died under Chu Mu's sword. The Qi Si in the palm did not have any power. It was only a symbol of a real Qi high sword artist. At the same time, it showed the level of control a Qi high sword artist had over the Ling Qi of heaven and earth. Chu Mu's eyes were focused on the spirit aura whirlpool in his right palm. He was completely focused on the spirit aura whirlpool. His pupils reflected the spirit aura whirlpool. Strands of spirit aura mixed with demonic aura continuously flew in from all directions. It was like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, causing the small spirit aura whirlpool to expand little by little. I only need Ling Qi, Chu Mu said to himself. The gray Ling Qi whirlpool suddenly released wisps of gray Qi. It was the violent Yao Qi. A Qi high sword artist could command the Ling Qi of heaven and earth, but could not command the Yao Qi. The demonic aura was violent and destructive. Although it was mixed with spiritual energy in the air, it was clearly separated. In a place like the disorderly Goblin Mountains, the amount of Yao Qi was almost equal to the amount of Ling Qi. Thus, when a Qi high swordsman manipulated the Ling Qi of heaven and earth, it was inevitable that the Yao Qi would converge. This Yao Qi was not under their control. Therefore, swordsmen had to exclude demon Qi. Otherwise, their control of spirit Qi would become difficult due to the existence of demon Qi. They would not be able to do it perfectly, and if they were not careful, it would cause a violent conflict between spirit Qi and demon Qi, causing harm to themselves. Think about it. Originally, he wanted to use the spiritual Qi of heaven and earth to assist his attack or defense. If he ended up hurting himself because of the conflict between the demonic Qi, that would be really unlucky. Even though Chu Mu was extraordinarily talented, he could not go against this rule. Therefore, he expelled the demonic aura from his sea of Qi in his palm. Instantly, the grayish-white color turned white. If it was a swordsman who had just broken through to the Qi high realm, they would not be able to do this. They would need to try for days or even months before they could do it. However, Chu Mu's soul was extremely strong, and his control was unparalleled. He could easily do it by concentrating his mind. The white spirit Qi whirlpool covered the entire palm. It spun at a speed visible to the naked eye, making a whistling sound as if a strong wind was blowing. In the center of the white spirit chi whirlpool, the color was the darkest. It was a milky white color. Looking closely, the milky white color took up 30% of the entire white spirit chi whirlpool. 30%. Chu Mu frowned slightly, as if he was not satisfied with this ratio. Soon after, his expression returned to normal. 30% was actually not bad. When a swordsman with average talent broke through to the Chi High realm, they would need to spend 3 months to half a year in seclusion to be able to control the spirit Chi of heaven and earth and condense the sea of Chi in their palm. At this point, a swordsman at the Chi High realm would have the ability to control the spirit Chi of heaven and earth. But there was a limit to how much spirit Chi could be controlled. In other words, with one's body as the center, 10% of all the Ling Chi within a 1-kilometer radius would be able to increase a Chi high-level sword artist's attack or defense by 10%. After breaking through to the low Chi high realm, the radius of the spirit Chi increased from 1,000 meters to 2,000 meters. That 10% could also increase a swordsman's attack or defense by 10%. Similarly, after breaking through to the Chi high realm, Deshang could control the spirit Chi within a radius of 3,000 meters. After breaking through to the peak of the Chi high realm, he could control the spirit Chi within a radius of 4,000 meters. Some talented swordsmen could even control the spirit Chi within a radius of 5,000 meters when they reached the peak of the Chi high realm. Do not underestimate this 10%. The difference between a peak of the Chi high realm and a beginning of the Chi high realm was like heaven and earth. Above that would be 20%. A swordsman who could control 20% of the spirit Chi after forming the Chi sea in their palms would be extremely talented. Above that, there were even more talented swordsmen who could control 30% of the spirit Chi of heaven and earth. There were very few swordsmen who could control 30% of the spirit Chi of heaven and earth. Chu Mu was able to control 30% of the spirit aura within a 1,000-meter radius for his own use. This meant that his attack or defense could be increased by 30% from the original foundation. 30%, this was a terrifying ratio. It was enough to defeat any swordsman of the same level. Also, it was not impossible for a Chi high swordsman to control the spirit Chi of heaven and earth. Under some special circumstances, it was possible to increase the spirit Chi by 10% or even 20%. By then, the swordsman would be even more powerful. But these circumstances were too rare. Most of the Chi high swordsmen could only control 10% of the spirit Chi of heaven and earth when they reached the peak of the Chi high realm. Before, when Chu Mu killed the 13 core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect, he did not use any of the spirit Chi of heaven and earth. He only used his own Sky Yuan sword Chi, the more powerful lacerating mentality, and 1% of his perfect sword form. During the process of breaking through to the Chi high realm, Chu Mu entered the ethereal state. Deshang's perfect sword form also broke through to the perfect sword form. This did not take much time. After that, Chu Mu focused on understanding the lacerating mentality. He increased the lacerating mentality from 50% to 60% before he finished the ethereal state. After the perfect sword form, not only was it twice as powerful as Deshang's perfect sword form, it was also much more flexible. Once it was used, it would be able to shake the heavens and earth. In terms of energy consumption, it was actually less than Deshang's perfect sword form. It was like some of the unnecessary edges had been smoothed out. The sharpness of the sword had also changed from being exposed to the outside to being restrained. The power had become more condensed, and it could even flow around the sword like sword chi, reducing the energy consumption. Chu Mu finally understood why the sword hero rank swordsmen could use 1% of their sword force without restraint. It was because their sword force had reached perfection. No wonder one of the requirements to become a sword hero was to reach perfection in sword force. 60% of the lacerating mentality was still at the minor completion level, but its power was equivalent to 90% of Deshang's perfect sword form. With every 10% increase in the mentality, the power would increase by a lot. 60% ripping concept and 1% perfect sword force. Adding on the fact that the quality and quantity of his sword aura was much higher than that of a normal low-chi high-realm sword artist, Chu Mu's every sword attack was extremely terrifying. It was comparable to a perfect chi high-realm sword artist. It was not something that a low-chi high-realm sword artist or high-chi high-realm sword artist could defend against. Among them, the flying swan illusory steps also played a huge role. With the combination of the two, Yi Chun had killed all 13 core disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect with his speed sky sword. Yi Chun took out all the space armlets from the 13 corpses with ease. There were 10 low-rank space armlets in total, and each of them contained soul stones, pellets, spirit medicines, ores, metals, and so on. Chu Mu even found 3 Earth-rank ancient sword arts among them. However, these 3 Earth-rank ancient sword arts were much weaker than the Broken Star sword art. Just the Broken Star sword art alone would have taken Chu Mu a lot of time to train, so Chu Mu just put away the 3 Earth-rank ancient sword arts. After organizing a little bit, Yi Chun found 35 low-rank black iron soul stone cards, 12 low-rank bronze soul stone cards, 23,500 low-rank soul stones, and 1,120 mid-rank soul stones. In addition, there were also 10 extreme-rank swords and 3 upper-rank swords. Their value was also extraordinary, and Chu Mu had gained a lot from them. Chu Mu did not care about the 13 corpses. He knew that after he left this place, these 13 corpses would become some demonic beast's food. His body flashed as he used the flying swan illusory step. Chu Mu's body seemed to have stopped at the same place, but in reality, he had already appeared dozens of meters away. He left with a light and fast speed. Putting the speed sky sword back into its scabbard, the mid-rank high-rank demonic beast in front of him fell down unwillingly. Its demonic core had also become Chu Mu's spoils of war. This demonic beast was killed by Chu Mu in front of its cave. After killing it, Chu Mu threw the corpse far away. He then moved a huge rock that weighed a few thousand pounds and placed it at the entrance of the cave. He then walked into the cave and blocked the entrance with the huge rock. The light inside the cave immediately dimmed. Luckily, this demonic beast liked to be clean, and the inside of the cave was rather dry, which did not make Chu Mu feel disgusted. A strand of sword chi came out of his finger and swept across the cave, clearing out an empty space that was as clean as a mirror. Chu Mu sat down with his legs crossed. He first closed his eyes and adjusted his sky origin sword chi for a while. Then he opened his eyes, which were shining brightly. With a move of his hand, a jade box appeared in his palm. He opened the jade box, and a yellow-colored fruit was quietly lying inside. The surface of the fruit was filled with cracks, as if it was a round rock that had not been broken by a hammer. The sky desolate fruit. Originally, Chu Mu's plan was to eat the sky desolate fruit when he was at the peak of the chi transformation realm. On one hand, it would increase his cultivation talent to the 6th rank, and on the other hand, it would allow his sword chi to break through to the chi high realm. But later on, the plan changed. He needed to train the 9 transformations of Sky Yuan to the 9th transformation first. Once he reached the 9th transformation, he would naturally have the opportunity to break through, and would not need the sky desolate fruit. But now that he had broken through to the Chi High realm, his cultivation talent had an obvious effect on his cultivation speed. Adding on the pressure from the Sky Slaughterer sword, Chu Mu decided to eat the sky desolate fruit. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 407. A black shadow appeared from afar. In the blink of an eye, it arrived with the wind and stopped at the place where Chu Mu broke through to the Chi High realm. Roar! The demonic beast that was about to eat a corpse was frightened. It raised its head and looked at the man in the black robe. It let out a threatening roar, its 4 limbs grabbed the ground tightly, and its body arched backwards like a compressed spring. It was about to launch a fatal attack. A deep nasal sound came out from the man's nose. He raised his left hand and put his index finger and middle finger together. Sword chi was released from his fingers, and a sharp sword light was released. With a slight shake, a bright light golden sword light shot out from his fingers. At the same time, the mid-level demon beast's 4 limbs suddenly bounced, and the ground cracked. A strong sound of breaking the air resounded, and it turned into an arrow that shot towards the black-robed man. The sharp claws that it stretched forward left a few dazzling scratches in the air, as if it was tearing the space apart. Poochie! The golden sword light hit the head of the demonic beast and instantly pierced through it. The body of the demonic beast trembled in midair, and changed its direction slightly. It rushed past the side of the black-robed man, and brought up a strong gust of wind. The black-robed man's long hair and clothes fluttered. With a bang, the demonic beast charged for another 10 meters before heavily crashing into a huge rock. The huge rock shattered into pieces, and the demonic beast's head was like a watermelon that had been smashed by a hammer. Red and white blood splattered everywhere. Without using his sword, he killed a middle-level demonic beast with just a finger. This kind of power was not something that even a Deshang sword warrior of the Qi High Realm could do. The man's long black hair was loose behind his head. His eyebrows were long and sharp like a sword. His eyes were narrowed and sharp like a sword. The air around him was filled with coldness. Looking at the man's face, he was about 30 years old. The expression on his face was a bit stiff. His eyes were sunken and his nose was like an eagle's. This made him look a bit gloomy. It was obvious that he was not someone easy to get along with. He was wearing a long black robe and had a long sword on his back. He was dressed exactly the same as the 13 corpses on the ground. Even the symbol on his sleeve was the same. This meant that he was from the same background as the 13 corpses, a core disciple of the Moro sword sect. This person's chi was much stronger than the 13 Qi High warriors from the Mo Luo sword sect. It was obvious that his sword chi was much stronger than Deshang, who was at the Qi High realm. He was a peak Qi High warrior, and not just any peak Qi High warrior. He took a step forward and appeared more than 10 meters away with a whoosh. He stopped beside a corpse and flipped the corpse over with a light kick. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the wound on the corpse's throat. Without saying a word, other than the corpse that had been gnawed out of shape by the demonic beast, the wounds of the other 12 corpses had all been examined. Their wounds are all the same, and they were all killed by the same person. His attacks were decisive and ruthless, and his swordsmanship was extraordinary. He had mastered the essence of swordsmanship. The time of death of these junior brothers was almost the same, which means that they didn't fight back much. This person, the black-robed man, retracted his gaze and looked into the distance. His narrowed eyes shone like the sun. He's a strong opponent. As he spoke, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he looked around carefully. Suddenly, he frowned because he had encountered something that he couldn't understand. He was also a core disciple of the Moro sword sect. He had the sword chi of the peak Qi High realm, and his strength was much stronger than normal peak Qi High warriors. This time, he came to the Chaoyao Mountains to train his swordsmanship. He hoped that he could improve in battles with demonic beasts and find a chance to break through. When one of the Moro sword sect disciples released the signal flare, he had seen it. But at that time, he was far away and fighting with a super-level demonic beast, so he couldn't get away. It took him a while to kill the mid-level super-rank monster beast. After thinking for a while, he quickly rushed to the place where the signal flare rose into the sky. When he was still halfway there, he felt the changes in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. They were all converging towards a certain place, and a huge vortex of spiritual chi appeared in his eyes. This was obviously the sign of someone breaking through to the Qi High realm, and it was a talented sword warrior. He sped up, but before he arrived, the breakthrough had already ended. When he arrived, he couldn't find the person who had broken through. Instead, he saw 13 corpses from the same Moro sword sect as him. Could it be that the sword warrior, who had just broken through to the Qi High realm, killed them? The black-cloaked man frowned and thought to himself, no, even if it was the current sword hero, when he had just broken through to the Qi High realm, he wouldn't be able to kill 2 Qi High warriors, 8 low-level Qi High warriors, and 3 entry-level Qi High warriors in just 10 breaths of time. If it wasn't him, then who killed all 13 of them? And who broke through to the Qi High realm here? 2 questions circled around in his mind, and a third question popped up. Is the sword warrior who killed the 13 of them in the same group as the sword warrior who broke through to the Qi High realm here? Without an answer, he could only search for the answer himself. After carefully searching the area, he used his movement skill and quickly flew away. The direction he was heading towards was the direction that Chu Mu had gone. In the pitch-black cave of the demon beast, Chu Mu sat with his legs crossed. His body was motionless, as if he had turned into a statue. Even his breathing had become so slow that it was almost inaudible. The Tianyuan sword qi was moving in his meridians at lightning speed. After one full cycle after another, there were rumbling sounds coming from his meridians, as if thunder was rumbling non-stop. The power of the Tianhuang fruit kept moving in his body. His organs, blood, bones, meridians, muscles, etc. were all hit by the power of the Tianhuang fruit and slowly seeped into his body. A small Tianhuang fruit contained a vast amount of energy. This energy kept moving in and out of Chu Mu's body, slowly merging into Chu Mu's body. Chu Mu could only feel the power of the Tianhuang fruit continuously merging into his body, but he did not know where it went. He only had a strange feeling, as if which part of his body was improving was the most important part. During this time, the Tianyuan sword qi was moving faster and faster. It was so fast that Chu Mu could barely keep up with it, but his meridians were still able to bear it and did not show any signs of overloading. A large amount of spiritual qi came from all directions. Even the 1,000-pound boulder could not keep it out. The spiritual qi kept flowing in through the cracks of the boulder, creating a sharp whistling sound. The spiritual qi that was flowing into the demon beast cave became visible to the naked eye. It was like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, rushing towards Chu Mu. It directly entered Chu Mu's body and was quickly converted into the Tianyuan sword qi. The minimum requirement for a Qi High sword artist to train was the upper rank profound level sword qi art. The 9 transformations of heaven was the top of the profound level sword qi art. Even though Chu Mu had already reached the 9th transformations, he could still continue to train until he reached the peak of the 9th transformations. The continuous spiritual qi was like an endless river. Once it entered Chu Mu's body, it was instantly converted into pure Tianyuan sword qi, causing the amount of Tianyuan sword qi to increase. 2 things at the same time. The power of the Tianhuang fruit came wave after wave. Chu Mu had an indescribable feeling. It was as if his whole body was about to float. It was an indescribable feeling. This was a true rebirth. With a loud bang, the 1,000-pound boulder at the entrance of the cave suddenly exploded. Broken rocks flew in all directions at high speed. Dust filled the air. A black figure appeared at the entrance of the cave. With a flash, it turned into a black light and entered the cave. The man in the black robe glanced around. The darkness in the cave could not affect his eyes at all. His eyes immediately fell on Chu Mu's body. His pupils seemed to have turned into golden gems, shooting out sharp sword light. Die! Without any reason or need for any reason, the man in the black robe reached out his left hand and pointed his finger like a sword. A bright golden light suddenly appeared at the tip of his finger. That bright light continued to condense, and became more and more intense. As his finger trembled, a bright golden sword light pierced through the air and shot towards the center of Chu Mu's eyebrows. The power of this sword light was at least 3 times more powerful than the mid-level demon beast that he had killed before. He wanted to kill Chu Mu with one strike. With a poochie sound, the golden sword light pierced through Chu Mu's forehead and shot behind him, hitting the cave wall. The hard cave wall was as fragile as tofu. The golden sword light sank deep into it and disappeared, leaving behind a bottomless, finger-sized hole. The surroundings were not damaged at all. It was enough to show that the golden sword light had condensed to an astonishing degree. The man in the black robe did not show any joy after killing his target. He pulled out his long sword and the golden sword light immediately flashed in the dark cave. He waved his hand forward and a clanging sound was heard. Faint golden sparks splashed out. His wrist trembled slightly. Under the golden sword, a golden butterfly appeared. It seemed to be about to fly away. It was beautiful and contained an astonishing sharpness. In the dark, Chu Mu attacked again. Within a breath, he had stabbed out 18 times. Each sword stabbed at a different part of the golden butterfly. When the last sword stabbed, the golden butterfly shook and exploded into golden particles. The sword did not stop. It flew forward like a meteor chasing after the moon, stabbing towards the man in the black robe's throat. The man in the black robe did not dodge. He slashed his sword out diagonally, leaving a straight and bright mark in the air. It was as if he had cut a hole in space, accurately blocking Chu Mu's attack. The 2 swords could not avoid colliding again. A powerful force surged. Faint golden sparks splashed out in all directions. The 2 forces attacked Chu Mu and the man in the black robe respectively. Chu Mu's body lightly flew backwards, while the black-robed man took 3 steps back. The long sword's edge was oppressively pointed straight at Chu Mu. At the tip of the sword, a 3-inch golden sword light was emitted. The sword's body was steady, as if even a 1,000-kilogram boulder wouldn't be able to make the sword sway. The man in the black robe's eyes suddenly lit up. It was as if a high-powered light bulb had suddenly been turned on. His stiff expression also revealed a hint of bloodthirsty excitement. All the doubts in his heart had been answered. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 408. So it's you. The man in the black robe said with a hoarse voice. What he said confused Chu Mu. An ear-piercing buzzing sound rang out. The black-robed man's golden longsword suddenly expanded to 10 inches. His wrist lightly flicked and a golden sword flower blossomed. It left the sword tip and shot towards Chu Mu. The edges of this golden flower were full of sharpness. The man in the black robe had displayed an extraordinary sword art, which made Chu Mu's eyes brighten. He slightly shook his right wrist and the speed sky sword stabbed out 20 times in a second. Every sword stabbed at a different spot on the golden flower, causing it to shatter and disappear into the air. The man in the black robe was at the peak of the Qi High realm and had an extraordinary sword art. When he saw Chu Mu's sword art, he was so excited that he did not use his ancient sword art to kill Chu Mu. Instead, he used his sword art to fight with Chu Mu. Of course, the man in the black robe did not use his pure sword art. He used some of his sword qi and the mentality of gold, but he did not use his sword aura. It was unknown if he did not want to use it or if he did not have the ability to. Chu Mu could see the excitement in his opponent's eyes. When he saw the man in the black robe's sword attack, he knew that he was going to use his sword art to defeat him. When it came to sword arts, Chu Mu had never been afraid of anyone. After destroying the golden sword light, Chu Mu lightly swung his sword. A dark golden sword light sliced through the air. The man in the black robe's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He felt that everything in front of him had disappeared. All he could see was a dark golden sword light that was growing bigger and bigger in front of him. There was no way to avoid it. He could only fight. The man in the black robe swung his sword back towards the dark golden sword light. The expected collision did not happen. The dark golden sword light was cut in half by the sword. The black-robed man's body trembled. His heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly brandished his golden sword, forming an airtight golden sword curtain. A light flashed in Chu Mu's eyes. He fully activated his perfect vision sword and changed his sword technique from a slash to a stab. The quick air sword transformed into a dark golden cold star that pierced into the golden sword screen. The impenetrable sword screen seemed to be in vain. The black-robed man's scalp went numb. His eyes only saw a dark golden color penetrate his golden sword screen and fly towards his throat. Before the sword arrived, his throat already felt a slight pain as if it had been pierced. The black-robed man was horrified. The golden longsword paused for a moment, and the countless swords shrunk into a single sharp sword that pierced towards Chu Mu. If Chu Mu continued to stab towards him, he would also be pierced by the black-robed man's sword. At that time, both sides would be injured. This meant that the black-robed man was not only ruthless to his enemies, but also to himself. Chu Mu's body flashed, and his sword changed from a stab to a burst. After the sword broke the black-robed man's longsword, he took advantage of the momentum and stabbed out at an even faster speed. In an instant, there was the sound of wind and thunder breaking through the air. It was so sharp that the black-robed man's pores almost exploded. He felt that Chu Mu's swordsmanship was extraordinary. Thus, he wanted to test out Chu Mu's swordsmanship. It would be best if he could kill Chu Mu with his sword. But now he realized that he was wrong, very wrong. This guy's swordsmanship was not just extraordinary, but unpredictable. The black-robed man could swear that he had met thousands of swordsmen in his life, but none of them had such swordsmanship. It could be said to be unparalleled. Although he was unwilling, the black-robed man already knew that in terms of swordsmanship, he was definitely no match for his opponent. In that case, he would use all his strength to kill his opponent with his sword. In an instant, the black-robed man's aura changed. A terrifying sword chi erupted from his body, and the strength of his protective sword chi increased to the maximum. The speed of the golden longsword increased, and the sword pierced towards Chu Mu first. This sword was extremely sharp and fast. If Chu Mu insisted on continuing to attack, he would be stabbed to death by the black-robed man's sword before he could stab him. In an instant, Chu Mu showed extraordinary adaptability. 1% of the sword chi was integrated into his sword, and his sword came into contact with the black-robed man's sword. The power of the stone quake was activated, and the high-frequency vibration immediately deflected the black-robed man's sword, which swept past Chu Mu's ear. The terrifying sharpness immediately cut off a few strands of hair, and a terrifying whistling sound poured into his ears, making him feel like his eardrums were being pierced. However, this did not affect Chu Mu at all. He threw out a sword attack, instantly breaking through the black-robed man's protective sword chi and activating the stone quake. Stone quake wave sword. Although the stone quake was still at the peak of minor completion, the power of the sky origin sword chi and the ripping poetic perspective had increased a lot, which made the stone quake wave sword much more powerful. It was too fast and too sudden. The black-robed man did not have time to withdraw his sword, so he hurriedly stepped back. His left hand twisted the scabbard in front of him, blocking Chu Mu's sword attack. With a boom, the sword chi on the scabbard was shattered, and a huge vibrating power spread throughout the entire scabbard. The ripping poetic perspective increased the sharpness of the space-speed sword to the extreme, leaving a clear mark on the scabbard, almost cutting it in half. The black-robed man's chi and blood surged, and his left hand went numb. He took the opportunity to retreat, and at the same time, he pulled back his golden longsword and threw out a couple of golden sword chi at Chu Mu. He did not want to injure the enemy, but only wanted to stop Chu Mu for a split second. Chu Mu could not help but feel that it was a pity. Originally, this sword attack had the chance to injure the opponent. If he had only infused 1% of his sword aura into the Stonequake Wave Sword, its power would have increased again. Unfortunately, the Stonequake Wave Sword was a sword skill that had already been formed. It was composed of sword chi, ripping poetic perspective, and Stonequake. Although Chumu was able to combine sword aura, concept power, and 1% of his sword aura into a single sword attack, that was only a normal attack. It was an extension of his basic sword technique. He couldn't merge too much of his sword aura, concept power, and stone-shaking energy into it, or else it would go beyond his control and hurt himself before hurting the enemy. In order to increase the power of the Stonequake Wave Sword, he could only start from the sword chi, the ripping poetic perspective, and the Stonequake. If he could add in his sword aura, theoretically, he could indeed increase the power of the Stonequake Wave Sword. However, he would need to go through a period of comprehension to find the right way to infuse his sword aura into it. By then, it would be a brand new sword skill. Sword skills were different from sword art. Sword arts could be infused with anything, but only a little bit of everything could be infused. Sword skills, on the other hand, had to have a foundation to carry it. For example, the foundation of the Stonequake Wave Sword was the Stonequake, which would be infused with other forces. Without the Stonequake, it would not be the Stonequake Wave Sword. If Chumu wanted to infuse 1% of his sword aura into the Stonequake Wave Sword, it would not be something that could be done in a short period of time. Chumu could not afford to be distracted in a battle. His regret flashed through his eyes, and his body leaped up, thrusting out his sword from above. It instantly turned into a dark golden sword light, which was as thick as a finger, and shot towards the black-robed man. The black-robed man had just backed off a few meters before he managed to dissipate the vibrating power from the scabbard. Just as he was about to counterattack, his eyes reflected a dazzling dark golden light. The sharpness within it made him shiver. Space-shattering sword strike. Space-shattering sword strike was also a sword skill. Its foundation was the lacerating mentality, which greatly increased its power. However, it was still unable to infuse 1% of the sword aura into it. He would have to find some time to comprehend it and infuse 1% of the sword aura into it, increasing the power of the sword skill once again. The black-robed man's pupils shrank again, and he was extremely shocked. The power of Chumu's two sword skills was extremely frightening. The golden longsword vibrated, and the air rippled out. Sword chi surged, and a rustling sound was heard in the cave. More than 80% of the gold mentality was infused into the sword, causing the golden longsword to release an even more dazzling light. The sword drew a circle in front of him, and layers of golden ripples spread out. The space-shattering sword strike was immediately stopped in midair. The black-robed man let go of the scabbard, and his left hand formed a sword. A golden sword light gathered at the tip of his finger, and he pointed it out again. It turned into a golden sword light and shot towards Chumu's forehead. Chumu and the black-robed man started to fight fiercely. The broken star sword art was performed, and thousands of broken stars started to rotate in the air, like a river of stars. The black-robed man did not dare to hold back, and also performed his earth-rank ancient sword art. Rays of golden sword light were extremely sharp, and left clear marks in the air. Every ray of sword light was extremely powerful, and could easily kill a low-chi sea-realm sword artist. Chumu's protective sword chi was pierced through, and even the feathery pattern armor was pierced through as well. This bought some time for Chumu to quickly dodge and counterattack. The two swords clashed many times, and the bright golden sword light and the dark golden sword light kept flashing in the dark cave. Countless sparks flew out in all directions like fireworks. The black-robed man was using an extreme-rank sword art, and his sword chi was much stronger than Chumu's. On the other hand, Chumu was using a high-rank sword art. After so many clashes, the rapid sky sword was full of cracks, and its power was greatly affected. With a horizontal slash, The dark golden sword light turned into a crescent moon, and Chu Mu took this opportunity to put away the rapid sky sword and took out the heavy star sword. Now that he was at the low Qi Sea realm, he could use the heavy star sword without any pressure. Once the sword was out of the scabbard, suddenly dark golden stars appeared in all directions. They fell bit by bit like falling stars. With the heavy star sword in his hand, Chu Mu's attacking power had increased again. The pressure on the black-robed man suddenly increased, and he immediately gathered the qi of heaven and earth. Every time he attacked, the qi of heaven and earth would help him, increasing his attacking power by 10%. It was also the first time that Chu Mu had used the qi of heaven and earth in a battle. Once he used it, a huge amount of qi came roaring towards him. Even the qi of heaven and earth that the black-robed man was using was affected, and was being controlled by Chu Mu. The black-robed man was shocked. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. He quickly retreated, planning to leave the cave and fight with Chu Mu again outside. Since the space here was limited, the amount of qi it could hold was also limited. Once he used the qi, it would clash with each other. Since Chu Mu could control more qi of heaven and earth than him, he was immediately suppressed. If they were outside, where the qi of heaven and earth was endless, this situation would not happen. Sensing the black-robed man's intention to retreat, Chu Mu immediately took the opportunity and used the stone-shaking wave sword, sky-splitting sword attack, and the broken star sword art. With the heavy star sword in his hand, the power of his sword skills had obviously increased. With the support of 30% of the qi of heaven and earth, the black-robed man's long sword was knocked away, and the heavy star sword pierced through his body. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 409. As the profound star sword was pulled out, blood splashed into the sky. The black-robed man staggered back a few steps, his eyes bulging out as he stared at Chu Mu. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Finally, he fell down unwillingly. His heart was crushed by the profound star sword. His life force was quickly drained away, and he died completely. If it was before, Chu Mu would have used the dark red dagger to suck his blood dry. But after the secret of the dark red dagger was revealed, it no longer had the ability to suck blood. Without the ability to absorb blood, although the dark red small sword was still incomparably sharp, its power was greatly reduced. Adding on the fact that the dark red small sword was a keepsake of the central main sword region's Sword Dao sect, Azura sword sect, Chu Mu subconsciously didn't plan on using it again. After the black-robed man died, Chu Mu quickly took off the spatial bracelet from his body. It was a mid-rank spatial bracelet. It was obvious that upper-rank spatial bracelets were very rare. Then, he searched for a while, but didn't find anything. He thought that all the valuable items must be kept in the spatial bracelet. He then put away the supreme rank sword. Then, he slashed the profound star sword on the stone wall. Hot sparks flew out and landed on the black-robed man's long robe. It immediately started to burn, and soon, it turned into a raging fire. The night was dark and the sky was filled with stars. The night sky above the demon chaos plane was quiet and deep. In a guest room of the wind facing in the demon-shaking city, Chu Mu was taking a hot bath. There were a few leaves of the jade palm tree in the bathtub, giving the hot water a refreshing herbal smell. Ever since he entered the demon chaos plane, Chu Mu was constantly in the middle of battles. He didn't have much time to rest. Even when he was resting, he didn't dare to fall asleep for fear of being attacked. Therefore, in the past 2 months, his nerves had been in a tense state. Even an Iron Man couldn't last too long in that kind of situation. Otherwise, it would only bring about injuries to himself. It had been 2 months since Chu Mu arrived at the Demon Shaker City. His original plan was to reach the 9th revolution of the 9 transformations of heavenly essence within 3 months and break through to the Qi High Realm within half a year. but now, because of the battles and the dangerous situations, he had broken through the 9 transformations of Sky Yuan a month earlier than expected. After that, he had broken through to the Qi High Realm. Therefore, it was a good idea to go out and train. After that, because of the desolate sky fruit, not only did his cultivation talent increase to the 6th rank, his sword Qi also increased from the initial Qi High Realm to the initial Qi High Realm. Even the 5th movement of the desolate sky sword body, the muscle chapter, was slightly improved and would be completed in a while. Soaking in the steaming hot water, Chu Mu's entire body was in a relaxed state. Because of the hot water, his blood flowed faster. Right now, his sword force had reached perfection and there was still room for improvement. Once he reached the peak of perfection, it would be the sword intent. The sword intent was a very mysterious thing, even more mysterious and powerful than the sword force. The tearing concept had reached 60%, and its power was equivalent to 90% of a regular concept. There was still a lot of room for improvement. As for the cloud concept, it had reached 72%. Although it wasn't as powerful as the tearing concept, it could make the flying swan illusory space step even more unpredictable. The stone quake was still at the peak of the initial stage. Chu Mu had a feeling that he would be able to break through to the Deshang realm within a month. He organized his thoughts. His sword Qi was at the initial Qi High realm. His sword force had reached perfection, 60% ripping mentality, 72% cloud mentality, and the stone quake was at the peak of the initial stage. Plus, he could use supreme grade swords at will and could use 30% of the natural Qi. His strength was more than 10 times stronger than before. Thinking about it, even a peak Qi high sword warrior from the Moro sword sect had died under Chu Mu's sword. It could be seen that Chu Mu's strength was extremely terrifying. He even had the thought of going to the East Saint Subpalace to challenge for the Sword Hero title. Thinking about the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero, Chu Mu realized that even if he fought against one of them, he would not be a match for them. In other words, with Chu Mu's current strength, he did not have the qualifications to challenge for the Sword Hero title. However, he was only 20 years old. In another 1 or 2 years, his strength would definitely increase. By then, he would have the ability to challenge for the Sword Hero title. After this training is over, I will go back to my family first. Then I will go back to the Sword faction. What I said that day should be fulfilled. Chu Mu thought to himself, but I don't know if senior brother Xiao is still alive. If he is, where is he now? Thinking about it, Chu Mu gradually fell asleep. This time, he slept for another hour. The water was completely cold, and when he woke up, he felt refreshed and energetic. Getting out of the bathtub, Chu Mu put on a clean robe and walked into the bedroom. He took out the middle-grade spatial bracelet of the black-robed man. There were a few high-grade and 1 top-grade swords, 2 human-grade ancient sword arts, 1 earth-grade ancient sword art, 3 mystic-grade mid-grade sword Qi arts, 1 mystic-grade high-grade sword Qi art, and 1 mystic-grade top-grade sword Qi art. There were also quite a number of spirit stones. Except for the top-grade profound sword Qi art, Chu Mu did not care about the rest. This top-grade profound sword Qi art was a metal-attributed sword art. Chu Mu looked through it once and put it away. It was useless to him, so he might as well keep it for future use. In addition, there was also a secret skill called the gold-piercing sword finger. Strictly speaking, it could be considered a finger art. Gold-piercing sword finger? Chu Mu was slightly startled. In the ancient sword continent there were mainly sword cultivators, and they all practiced the sword. Besides movement skills and some secret skills that could increase strength and fly, the main attacking methods were sword arts, sword moves, and sword skills. This kind of sword finger art was very rare, and it was also Chu Mu's first time seeing it. After carefully looking through the contents, Yi Chen realized that this gold-piercing sword finger could be considered a finger art. However, the Eastern sword domain did not have such a thing, and there were no records about it. Could it be that there were people on the ancient sword continent who practiced finger arts before? Chu Mu subconsciously had such a thought, but he soon shook his head. His understanding of the ancient sword continent was still far from enough. Only when his strength reached a certain level would he be able to come in contact with more mysteries. In any case, he could also practice the gold-piercing sword finger because he had the lacerating mentality. The golden sword light that the black-robed man had used his finger to perform should be the gold-piercing sword finger. Its power was also extraordinary. Chu Mu immediately decided to practice this secret skill. Besides practicing the gold-piercing sword finger, Chu Mu also wanted to study the stone-shaking wave sword and the space-splitting sword attack again. He wanted to integrate 1% of his sword aura into them to increase their power. Once he succeeded, his strength would increase by a lot. This time, Chu Mu directly paid 2,000 low-rank soul stones and booked a room for 20 days. Chu Mu had obtained a lot of soul stones from killing those Qi High Realm sword cultivators in the Chaoyao Mountains. Counting them together, he had obtained a few 100,000 soul stones. 1,000 soul stones were nothing. Plus, he had also obtained a lot of demon nuclei, which could be sold for a lot of soul stones. Chu Mu first practiced the gold-piercing sword finger. As the name suggested, the gold-piercing sword finger was related to the gold element. It needed to be activated with the gold element to be able to unleash its power. A normal sword cultivator would use the gold element sword qi as the main element and the metal mentality to perform the gold-piercing sword finger. Chu Mu did not have any gold element sword qi, but he had a variation of the metal mentality. The lacerating mentality was even sharper than the metal mentality. Chu Mu spent an entire day studying the gold-piercing sword finger. After breaking through to the Qi High Realm, his soul power did not increase, but he could feel that something had changed. It was as if he had turned from a rock into a crystal. His power of understanding had also increased. Even though the gold-piercing sword finger was very mysterious and was not any weaker than the broken star sword art, Chu Mu was still able to fully understand it in just one day. Then, Chu Mu spent another day thinking and simulating the gold-piercing sword finger. Because the gold-piercing sword finger mainly used the gold element sword qi and the metal mentality as a supplement, Chu Mu did not have any gold element sword qi, so he had to make some modifications. 3 days later, Chu Mu finally finished modifying the gold-piercing sword finger. He changed it to using the lacerating mentality as the main element sword qi and the sky yuan sword qi as a supplement. Although the penetrating power of the sky yuan sword qi was not as good as the gold element sword qi, the lacerating mentality was more powerful than the metal-piercing sword finger. Using another 2 days, Chu Mu had finally mastered the gold-piercing sword finger. Putting his left index and middle fingers together like a sword, a dark gold color suddenly condensed on the tip of his finger. The sky yuan sword qi flowed through his meridians and poured into the dark gold color, diluting the color and turning it into a golden color. The golden color became more and more intense, emitting a frightening sharpness. Chu Mu took out a middle-rank sword and his golden-piercing sword finger instantly shot towards the middle-rank sword. A dazzling golden sword ray broke through the air and instantly hit the middle-rank sword's body. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing rang out and the golden sword ray shattered. A small finger-sized hole appeared on the middle-rank sword's body, penetrating half of the sword. And this was the result of Chu Mu's initial mastery of the gold-piercing sword finger. If he could master it completely, it would be even more powerful, and it would not be a problem for him to pierce through mid-rank swords. Out of the 20 days, there were still 15 days left. Chu Mu rested for a bit before starting to study the stone-shaking wave sword. Using the stone-shaking power as the bone and the sky yuan sword qi and the tearing mentality as the flesh and blood, Chu Mu broke down the stone-shaking wave sword and studied it one by one. Then, he tried to merge the 1% of the complete sword aura. It was a difficult process. If it were not for the fact that Chu Mu's comprehensive ability had increased after breaking through to the Qi High Realm, it would have taken him a lot of time. 5 days later, he finished his study. Another 5 days later, the new stone-shaking wave sword was created. Using the stone-shaking power as the bone, the Sky Yuan sword Qi and the tearing mentality as the flesh and blood, and the 1% of the complete sword aura as the soul, the new stone-shaking wave sword was even more complete and powerful. What was worth mentioning was that during this study, the peak level of the stone-shaking power had reached Deshang level, and its power had become even more powerful. With the experience of studying the stone-shaking wave sword, he was able to study the sky-shattering sword attack even faster. 3 days later, he finished his study of the sky-shattering sword attack. Chu Mu used another 2 days to train the new sky-shattering sword attack. Using the tearing mentality as the bone, the Sky Yuan sword Qi and the stone-shaking power as the flesh and blood, and the 1% of the complete sword aura as the soul, the new sky-shattering sword attack was completely formed. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 410. After spending 20 days, Chu Mu had trained the gold-piercing sword finger to Deshang level. He had also successfully integrated the rock-shaking wave sword and the space-splitting sword strike into 1% of his sword force. Adding on the fact that the rock-shaking force had reached Deshang level, the power of these two sword skills had increased by 3 times, making them extremely terrifying. Until now, Chu Mu had a feeling that the sword skills he created himself were the most suitable for him. Those ancient sword skills were just a way for sword practitioners to learn. Of course, for sword practitioners with average talent who couldn't create their own sword skills, the ancient sword skills were a very good way to attack. But for sword practitioners with outstanding talent, the ancient sword skills were just a guide and a starting point. A true sword practitioner should have his own sword skills. Only then would he be able to fully utilize his own strengths and have the opportunity to walk on the path of the sword. Otherwise, if one were to always practice the ancient sword skills left behind by their predecessors and follow the footsteps of their predecessors, they would never be able to surpass the limits of their predecessors. It was as if he was trapped in a cage, unable to break free. Throughout history, which swordsmen who could leave their names in the annals of history did not break out of their shackles and walk on their own path of the sword before finally becoming famous. Chu Mu was now walking on this path. Until now, Chu Mu's strength had increased again. He estimated that a normal Qi High sword practitioner wouldn't be able to block one of his attacks. Even if they weren't at the level of a sword master, the difference wouldn't be too big. To reach the level of Deshang with sword Qi is not something that can be done in a day. Now that I have completed the 9 transformations of Sky Origin, the next step is to cultivate it to perfection and purify my sword Qi. Unless I change to a higher level sword Qi, it will be extremely difficult to break through. Chu Mu stood in front of the window in the room, looking at the bustling street outside with his hands behind his back. He said to himself, I can't make a breakthrough in my sword Qi cultivation in a short period of time. If I want to continue improving my strength, I have to start from the root. My sword force has just reached perfection, so there's still room for improvement. I can also continue to deepen my comprehension of the concept. The other thing is to cultivate the heavenly desolate sword physique. The desolate sky sword physique had 7 chapters. Chu Mu had skipped the blood chapter and was now cultivating the 5th chapter, the muscle chapter. Muscles covered his entire body, covering an extremely large area. Refining the heavenly desolate transformation wasn't a simple matter. Chu Mu had been training for 2 months now, but he still hadn't finished it. However, according to his progress, within 10 days, he should be able to finish the muscle section. Originally, there were still 15 ancient heavenly desolate pills left, but he had also used up a large amount of them. He estimated that after completing the muscle chapter, He would use up 10 ancient heavenly desolate pills, leaving him with only 5 left. Using 5 pellets to cultivate the skin of the 6th volume and the hair of the 7th volume was probably not enough. Fortunately, when he left the desolate city, he had ordered a large amount of heavenly desolate pills from the heavenly pill pavilion. When the time came, he would go to the desolate city to buy more heavenly desolate pills, and he should be able to cultivate the heavenly desolate sword physique. Once the heavenly desolate sword physique was completed, he would be able to cultivate the heavenly desolate sword chi in the 2nd volume of the heavenly desolate sword record. I should use a flying demonic beast as a means of transportation. Chumu suddenly had this idea. Previously, he rode the red-crowned crane from the Great Kuan Sword Mansion to the desolate border. When he returned to the Chu family, he also rode the red-crowned crane. If he were to walk, it would take a lot of time. Although walking was also a kind of cultivation, sometimes he was in a hurry and wished he could go as fast as possible. I have a mid-grade beast sealing pearl, so I should be able to seal a mid-grade flying demonic beast. Chumu said. The red-crowned crane was only a low-grade flying demonic beast. If it was a mid-grade flying demonic beast, its flying speed would be at least 2 or 3 times faster, and it would be the best means of transportation. He didn't think of sealing a demonic beast to fight for him. There was no need for that. After standing in front of the window for a while, Chumu turned and walked to the door. After opening it, he went downstairs. First, he went to the counter and paid 500 low-grade spirit stones. He could stay for 5 more days. Even if he only stayed for 3 or 4 days, he could still return some spirit stones. The first floor of the Windward Inn was still full. Chumu strode out of the inn. He had already asked the inn's waiter where he could buy demonic cores in the city. There were a few shops in the city that bought demonic cores, but the biggest one was the Yang family's shop. Their prices were also the most reasonable. Not long after, Chumu followed the flow of people and arrived outside a huge shop. The shop's signboard had the words Yang Ji written in vermilion. It was very eye-catching and left a deep impression on people. When Chumu walked into the Yang Ji shop, a shrewd-looking waiter immediately ran over and greeted him warmly. "Sir, what would you like to order?" The waiter didn't look very old, about 14 or 15 years old. His cultivation was only at the 6th stage of the sword chi realm. With such strength, it was impossible for him to hunt in the demon chaos plains. He could only be a waiter in this shop. "We have all kinds of elixirs, swords, demonic cores, and all kinds of treasures here." Chumu was here to sell demonic cores, but when he heard the waiter's words, he had an idea and asked casually, "Oh, do you sell flying demonic beasts here?" According to his understanding, the Yang family's shop was a very big shop that sold all kinds of things. Logically speaking, they should also sell demonic beasts. However, whether they did or not, Chumu didn't know. He just asked to try his luck. "Sir, you have come to the right place. In the entire demon-shaking city, only our Yang Ji shop sells demonic beasts. Not only do we have demonic beasts that run on the ground, we also have demonic beasts that swim in the water and fly in the sky." The waiter's mouth could run a train. "Take me to have a look." Chumu's eyes lit up. He temporarily put aside the matter of selling demonic cores. "Sir, please come with me." The waiter was also very happy. The price of demonic beasts wasn't cheap. Once they were sold, he would also get a commission and earn a lot of spirit stones. Demonic beasts wouldn't be placed in the shop's hall. The waiter led Chumu inside. Not long after, they arrived at a more spacious place. There were huge iron cages on both sides. Some of the cages were empty, while others had demonic beasts inside. These demonic beasts were basically low-level demonic beasts. Moreover, each of them had a lazy look, lying down weakly. When Chumu and the waiter walked past, they didn't even bother to lift their eyelid. In addition to Chumu, there were some other people here looking at the demonic beasts, but there weren't many. "Sir, they have all been fed some medicinal powder. This powder will temporarily make them weak. The waiter explained. Chumu nodded. Otherwise, the demonic beasts would be very noisy. Not to mention, it would be difficult to trap these demonic beasts in these iron cages. Sir, please take a look. The waiter continued. Are there any mid-level flying demonic beasts? The higher the grade, the better. Chumu glanced around and didn't find any mid-level flying demonic beasts. Mid-level flying demonic beasts. The waiter was suddenly surprised. Flying demonic beasts were relatively rare because it was very difficult to catch them alive. High-grade flying demonic beasts were even more difficult. After thinking about it, the waiter's eyes lit up. 10 days ago, a mid-level flying demonic beast was delivered. I don't know what grade it is. Sir, please come with me to take a look. Chumu followed the waiter and walked inside. Then, they stopped in front of a row of huge iron cages. Most of the iron cages were empty. They stopped in front of a huge iron cage. There was already a group of people who had arrived earlier than Chumu. One of them was from Yangji, and 3 of them were wearing red robes. They were from the Red Dress Association. They were discussing the price of the flying demonic beast in the iron cage. Once this wind-winged demonic dragon reaches adulthood, it will be a mid-level transcendent rank demonic beast. Moreover, it is born with the ability to control the power of the wind element. Its flying speed is 50% faster than other demonic beasts of the same level. It is an excellent helper for both traveling and assisting in battles. 5 million low-grade spirit stones is definitely worth it. The man from Yangji said. You are right, but this wind-winged demonic dragon is only a mid-level demonic beast. It will take a long time to reach mid-level transcendent rank. Even if we want to increase its grade in a short time, we will need to consume a lot of demonic cores. Therefore, 5 million low-grade spirit stones is too much. 3 million. The swordsman from the Red Dress Association immediately retorted. If that is the case, then we cannot come to an agreement. The man from Yangji shook his head and looked at Chumu. There was a hint of worry in his eyes. He asked casually, Are you here to buy a demonic beast as well? Manager Yang, this customer wants to buy a mid-level flying demonic beast. The higher the grade, the better. The waiter who had brought Chumu in immediately said. A mid-level flying demonic beast. Currently, Yangji only has this wind-winged demonic dragon. 5 million low-grade spirit stones. No bargaining. The man from Yangji said straightforwardly. He did not care if the price would scare Chumu. The 3 swordsmen from the Red Dress Association did not say anything. Instead, they looked at Chumu and sneered. No matter how they looked at it, they did not think Chumu was the kind of person who could take out 5 million low-grade spirit stones in one go. 5 million. Chumu frowned slightly. The price was indeed very high. Until now, he had never taken out so many spirit stones in one go. But after thinking about it carefully, 5 million low-grade spirit stones to buy a mid-level flying demonic beast that could grow to the super level was indeed a good deal. Killing a demonic beast and capturing one alive were 2 different concepts. To kill a mid-level flying demonic beast, perhaps one Chi-High swordsman could do it. But to capture a mid-level flying demonic beast alive, even 2 Chi-High swordsmen might not be able to do it. At least 3 to 5 Chi-High swordsmen would be the safest choice. One reason was the difficulty of capturing a demonic beast alive. The other reason was the value of the demonic beast itself. Flying demonic beasts were definitely more valuable than normal demonic beasts, because it was harder to capture and more useful, not to mention a flying demonic beast like the wind-winged demonic dragon that was both fast and powerful. But Chumu did not have 5 million low-grade spirit stones right now. After thinking for a while, Chumu said, 5 million is not a problem. But I can't take out so many low-grade spirit stones in one go. Can I use other things as collateral? As soon as Chumu said this, the 3 swordsmen from the Red Dress Association widened their eyes and stared at Chumu in shock. They thought they were hallucinating. The man from Yangji was also stunned. He quickly smiled and nodded. Of course you can use it as collateral. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 4:11. The waiter who brought Chu Mu here opened his mouth so wide that a fist could fit in it. 5 million low-grade spirit stones. Because Chu Mu was his guest, he could get a 1% commission, which was 50,000 low-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to several years of his income. Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? The younger of the 3 red-clothed swordsmen reacted, and said with a disdainful smile. Although the other 2 swordsmen didn't say anything, their eyes and expressions clearly showed that they thought Chu Mu was boasting. Chu Mu restrained his sword chi fluctuations, giving them the feeling that he was only a chi transformation Deshang. They didn't take him seriously at all. How could a swordsman who had achieved the great success of chi transformation possibly have something worth 5 million low-grade spiritual stones? Although they had the money, it was still the property of the association. They had been sent here to buy this wind-winged demon dragon. The Yangji deacon also stared at Chu Mu nervously. As long as Chu Mu didn't really take out 5 million low-grade spirit stones or something of the same value, he couldn't really rest assured. The group of people stared at Chu Mu without blinking. They all had different thoughts in their minds. Chu Mu smiled slightly. Do we settle the bill here? Hearing this, Deacon Yang felt more confident and quickly replied, Yes, I am in charge of this demonic beast. It is my mission, so I can make the decision. There was positive competition within the Yang family trading company. Every deacon had a clear division of task. If they completed the task on time, there would be extra rewards. If they couldn't, there would be a certain punishment. In this way, the trading company was full of vitality and enthusiasm. This wind-winged demonic dragon was assigned to his quota and became a must-complete task. Once the wind-winged demonic dragon was sold, he could get half of the reward, which was 200,000 low-grade spirit stones. More importantly, he had made a bet with the other deacons. 13 days had already passed from the deadline of the task. If he still didn't sell it, not only would he be punished, he would also lose the bet. This was a matter of face and a lot of spirit stones. If it weren't for the fact that the Red Coat Society had pushed the price down so low, he would have agreed to sell it long ago. Unfortunately, the Red Coat Society had demanded an exorbitant price of 3 million for a wind-winged demon dragon that was worth 5 million. No matter what, he couldn't agree to it. After all, the trading firm had set a minimum price for him. If he sold it below the minimum price, not only would he not be able to obtain any rewards, he would also be punished even more severely. Now, there was finally someone willing to spend 5 million low-grade spirit stones to buy it. This time, Chu Mu was really bleeding a lot. He took out several silver low-grade spirit stone cards and a dozen bronze low-grade spirit stone cards. He also took out more than 200,000 low-grade spirit stones and tens of thousands of mid-grade spirit stones. Of course, these were not enough, but the 200,000 low-grade spirit stones and tens of thousands of mid-grade spirit stones on the ground attracted everyone's attention, causing their breathing to quicken. They could all see that this kid had a space bracelet. A space bracelet that could store so many spirit stones had to be at least of mid-grade. The 3 Red Coat Society swordsmen looked at each other, and a glimmer of light flashed in their eyes. Only they knew what they were thinking. Then, Chu Mu took out a top-grade sword. Originally, he had planned to keep it for the Chu clan and give some to the Green Edge sword sect. Now, it seemed that he couldn't do that for the time being. After piecing everything together, Chu Mu finally gathered the value of 5 million low-grade spirit stones. A large portion of the items in the spatial bracelet had been reduced. Basically, he had handed over most of the spoils of war during this period of time, as well as some of his previous gains. Fortunately, he hadn't handed over the sword chi manual, ancient sword techniques, and so on. It didn't matter if he handed over the sword, but the sword chi manual was the foundation. If he brought it back to the Chu clan, it could be used as a secret cultivation method passed down in the family. Okay, these spirit stones, the top-grade sword, the space bracelet, and so on, are worth 5 million low-grade spirit stones. Manager Yang quickly finished counting, and an excited smile appeared on his face, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The worry between his brows also disappeared, and he looked at Chu Mu with gratitude in his eyes. No matter what, Chu Mu had done him a big favor. To be honest, this demonic beast is related to one of my missions. Seeing that the mission time is almost up, and I still haven't completed it, I'm very anxious. If I can't complete it, I'll be punished. Manager Yang's heart skipped a beat. I'll make the decision. The Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon will be sold to you for 4,500,000 low-grade spirit stones. Chu Mu nodded. If he could save 500,000 low-grade spirit stones, he wouldn't refuse. The 5 low-grade silver spirit stone cards returned to Chu Mu's hands. The 3 Red Coat Society swordsmen's eyes never blinked as they stared at the 5 low-grade silver spirit stone cards. Customer, this Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon is yours. Deacon Yang put away all the spirit stones and other things, then pointed to the demon beast in the iron cage behind him, and said with a smile. This wind-winged demonic dragon lay weakly in the iron cage. Its entire body was light green, and its body was about the size of a bull. Its appearance was a bit similar to the pterodactyl that had existed on Earth a long time ago. Unlike the pterodactyl, the wind-winged demonic dragon didn't have claws on its wings. It had a pair of small front claws and thick back claws. The wind-winged demonic dragon is very fierce. We have to feed it medicinal powder every 3 days to make it weak all over. Manager Yang continued, Our company provides door-to-door service. May I know where you want to send this wind-winged demonic dragon? No need. Feed it the antidote. Chu Mu shook his head and said calmly, Customer, you can't do that. Once it takes the antidote, the wind-winged demonic dragon will recover in 15 minutes. By then, this iron cage won't be able to hold it. Manager Yang was shocked, and the 3 Red Coat Society swordsmen sneered. Don't worry. Chu Mu took out the beast seal pearl. So you have the beast seal pearl. No wonder. Manager Yang was startled at first, but then he suddenly understood. He quickly turned around and opened the iron cage to take out the antidote and feed it to the wind-winged demonic dragon. The 3 Red Coat Society swordsmen stared straight at Chu Mu, and the light in their eyes became even brighter. These 3 guys all had sword chi cultivation at the chi transformation realm. Chu Mu didn't care about them before, and now he didn't care about them at all. Maybe it was because he had become more confident after his strength increased. He didn't have to be careful in the past anymore. Moreover, these 3 guys clearly wanted to stay and laugh at Chu Mu. Maybe they were laughing at Chu Mu's stupidity for showing off such wealth in front of them. What they didn't know was that Chu Mu didn't care about them at all. The Beast Seal Pearl had a secret method to activate it, and Chu Mu had already mastered it. When the sword chi entered the Beast Seal Pearl, it immediately lit up and emitted a faint light. The 3 Red Coat Society swordsmen had only heard of the Beast Seal Pearl, but they had never seen it before. They knew it was very precious, so they stared straight at it. Manager Yang had seen it before, but he hadn't seen it many times, so he also stared straight at it. The waiter's eyes were about to fall out. The light from the Beast Seal Pearl formed rings of light, shooting towards the wind-winged demonic dragon in the iron cage. The rings of light expanded rapidly, and when they came into contact with the wind-winged demonic dragon, they were large enough to envelop the wind-winged demonic dragon. As if it knew its fate, the wind-winged demonic dragon started to struggle. Unfortunately, the antidote hadn't taken effect yet. The wind-winged demonic dragon struggled for a while and couldn't move. The success rate of the Beast Seal Pearl was closely related to the level of the demonic beast and the user's strength. If a mid-ranked Beast Seal Pearl was used to seal a low-ranked demonic beast, then it would be as easy as blowing off dust. But if a Chi High Sword artist was asked to seal a mid-ranked demonic beast, it would be very difficult. There was only a 30% chance of success. Therefore, when a sword artist wanted to seal a demonic beast, they would usually weaken the demonic beast by injuring it. With Chu Mu's strength, although he was only at the Chi High level, his soul power was extremely powerful. His true strength was even stronger than a normal Chi High Sword artist. Even if the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon was at its peak, Chu Mu would still have a 100% chance of successfully sealing it, not to mention in this situation. When the rings of light from the Beast Seal Pearl had completely enveloped the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon, the rings of light shrunk and bound the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon's body. The Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon couldn't struggle and was bound. Its body started to emit a green light. Then, in front of everyone's eyes, the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon's huge body quickly shrunk and turned into a green light that shot towards the Beast Seal Pearl. With a shoo sound, the green light shot into the Beast Seal Pearl and disappeared. The Beast Seal Pearl shone with a green light. After 3 breaths of time, the light disappeared and a figure appeared in the originally empty Beast Seal Pearl. It was a miniature version of the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon, and it seemed to be sleeping in the Beast Seal Pearl. Even Chu Mu, the owner of the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon, was very surprised by this miraculous scene. He thought to himself that this ancient sword continent was indeed full of mysteries. The others, especially the waiter and the 3 swordsmen from the Red Coat Association, were so shocked that their eyeballs almost fell to the ground. The sealing of the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon was successful and the Beast Seal Pearl contained Chu Mu's essence blood. This meant that the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon was branded with Chu Mu's essence blood. Unless Chu Mu's essence blood was forced out of the Beast Seal Pearl, the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon would listen to Chu Mu's orders. However, after the sealing of the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon was successful, it would take about 3 days before it could be released. During these 3 days, the Beast Seal Pearl would bind the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon and imprint its essence blood. Manager Yang successfully sold the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon within the time limit of the mission, and Chu Mu also successfully bought a satisfactory flying demonic beast. Both of them were happy. After a few pleasantries, Chu Mu said goodbye and left. Originally, Chu Mu came to sell the demonic cores to earn spirit stones. Now, he didn't earn a single spirit stone. Instead, he spent 4.5 million low-grade spirit stones. In the end, he didn't sell the demonic cores because he wanted to keep them to feed the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon. If the Wind-Winged Demonic Dragon's strength increased, it would be able to fly faster. After Chu Mu left, the 3 swordsmen from the Red Coat Association looked at each other and nodded. 2 of them chased after Chu Mu, and the other left in a different direction. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 412. There was never a lack of people in the demon-shaking city. Even in the middle of the night there were still people walking on the street. After Chu Mu left the Yang Family Trading Company, he walked onto the streets and pondered the next step of his plan. His moon-white robe didn't attract much attention. In the entire Demon Shaker City, there were quite a number of swordsmen wearing moon-white robes. Although Mr. Yun had mentioned that the person who attacked and injured him was young and was wearing moon-white robes, he had only revealed his initial success in Qi transformation. On one hand, 2 months had already passed. Many people had already forgotten about this matter. After all, the number of swordsmen in Yao Shaker City was constantly being replenished. Every day there would be death. There were also other matters, both big and small. On top of that, the sword Qi Chu Mu was displaying was that of a Qi transformation Desheng. Although it was surprising, no one would think of it that way. Mr. Yun, I must kill this person. There is also the Wild Lion Gang. Since they want to kill me, they must pay a corresponding price. Chu Mu thought to himself. Let's go to the Wild Lion Gang first. Chu Mu thought to himself. Originally, there was no enmity between him and the Wild Lion Gang. However, because the Wild Lion Gang was blind and thought that Chu Mu was a target of robbery, they died under Chu Mu's sword. If this matter was over, Chu Mu would not care about the Wild Lion Gang at all. Unfortunately, the Wild Lion Gang was not willing to accept this and sent out a group of swordsmen to kill Chu Mu. In the end, they died under Chu Mu's sword. This formed a grudge between them and Chu Mu. If he did not seek justice, it would be detrimental to his sword heart. Only when one's sword heart was clear and his mind was clear, could he walk further on the sword Tao. Stop! A low shout came from behind, and in the next moment, Chu Mu caught sight of two flashing red figures from the corner of his eyes. Two people in red robes appeared on either side of him, and with a quick glance, Chu Mu knew that they were two of the three people in red robes from the Yang family trading company. What's the matter? Chu Mu glanced at them and asked indifferently. Of course. That beast seal pearl of yours is pretty good. Our guild master needs it, so you have to sell it to us. Don't worry. We won't let you lose out on the price. One of the red-clothed swordsmen said directly. He didn't try to hide it at all. His eyes were filled with naked greed. The moment the two of them blocked off Chu Mu, the surrounding swordsmen immediately reacted. When they saw their decorations, they immediately understood their identities. They retreated as though they were afraid of not being able to avoid them, forming a circle to watch the show. The Red Coat Association had always been arrogant and domineering. They did not care about reason at all, unless their fists were bigger than theirs. When they heard the three words, Beast Seal Pearl, some swordsmen were confused, while others were extremely shocked. Then how much can you offer? Chu Mu asked with a half-smile. He already knew what the swordsmen of the Red Coat Association were thinking. Seeing that it's not easy for you, we'll give you a high price. The red-clothed swordsmen stared coldly at Chu Mu. They didn't feel that there was anything wrong. Perhaps they subconsciously thought that a mere Qi-stage swordsman like Deshang wouldn't be a threat to them at all. As they spoke, they extended 2 fingers and said in a charitable tone, 2 million low-grade spiritual stones. Suddenly, there was a series of gasps all around. 2 million low-grade spiritual stones was definitely a huge sum for an ordinary swordsman. Some swordsmen might not even be able to earn 2 million low-grade spiritual stones in their entire lives. For them, 2 million low-grade spiritual stones was a concept that they could only imagine. It was inevitable that they would be extremely shocked. 2 million. Chu Mu thought that they would offer a low price, but he didn't expect it to be so low. He was a bit surprised, but then he said with a half-smile, a mid-grade beast seal pearl is worth several million low-grade spiritual stones, and a wind-winged dragon is worth 4.5 million low-grade spiritual stones. Combined, the two are worth more than 10 million low-grade spiritual stones. How dare you call 2 million low-grade spiritual stones a high price? Is the Red Coat Association so poor that they treat 2 million low-grade spiritual stones as a huge sum of money? The sarcasm immediately embarrassed the two swordsmen in red. Then they glared at Chu Mu angrily and said in a threatening tone, "No matter who you are or where you come from, the Demon Shaker City has its own rules. In this place, the Red Coat Association is one of the 3 major forces. We have to keep our word. Hand over the Beast Seal Pearl obediently and leave with 2 million low-grade spiritual stones. Otherwise, not only will you not get a single low-grade spiritual stone, but you will also have to leave your life behind." As soon as these words came out, the surrounding swordsmen's expressions changed slightly. They knew that if this continued, there would be bloodshed. However, in the Demon Shaker City, this kind of thing happened often, so it was not surprising. They were all still immersed in Chu Mu's words. 10 million low-grade spiritual stones. Imagining the scene of 10 million low-grade spiritual stones appearing in front of them, many swordsmen felt dizzy and almost fainted. It was too shocking. The swordsmen all stared at Chu Mu. They wanted to see how this young Qi Deshang realm swordsman would deal with it. He looked to be about 20 years old and had a Qi-Dashang realm cultivation. He also had the so-called mid-grade beast seal pearl and wind-winged demonic dragon. His background was definitely not simple. However, this was the Demon Shaker City. It had its own rules. If they tried to interfere with it with external forces, it would only cause a backlash from all the forces in the Demon Shaker City. Therefore, in this place, they could only rely on themselves or the local forces. If they did not deal with it well, there would be bloodshed. The swordsman thought that the one who would bleed would most likely be this young swordsman. They could not help but feel pity. "Stop!" A cold shout came. A figure pushed through the crowd and strode over. Chu Mu could not help but be startled. It was Han Yi. Chu Mu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Last time, when he was surrounded by the Wild Lion Gang, it was also Han Yi who came to help. This time, it was still Han Yi. However, this time, Han Ye's appearance would not be of any help. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it is Gang Leader Han of the Iron Sword Gang. Gang Leader Han, do you have any advice?" One of the red-clothed swordsmen looked at Han Yi and said with a faint smile. The Red-Clothed Association was 10 times stronger than the Iron Sword Gang. Therefore, the Red-Clothed Association did not put a second-rate gang like the Iron Sword Gang in their eyes, even if the other party was a gang leader. Han Ye's eyes flashed with anger, but he suppressed it in an instant. He cupped his hands and said to the red-clothed swordsman, "This is my friend. Please give me some face and let him go." "Your face?" The red-clothed swordsman suddenly sneered. His tone was disgusting. "Oh, I almost forgot. You are the gang leader of the Iron Sword Gang. You do have some face, but what does that have to do with me? I am a member of the Red-Clothed Association, not your Iron Sword Gang." Han Ye's face suddenly changed. Although he only needed to use his sword to kill these two people, once he killed them, the Iron Sword Gang would be destroyed by the Red-Clothed Association. "Gang Leader Han, since you are a gang leader, quickly step back. Otherwise, it will cause a misunderstanding between the Iron Sword Gang and the Red-Clothed Association. You should know that the Red-Clothed Association has destroyed many second-rate gangs. The Iron Sword Gang is not one of them." Another red-clothed swordsman said coldly. This sentence was full of threat, causing Han Ye's face to change greatly. The anger in his heart surged, but at the same time, there was also a deep fear. If he was alone, perhaps he would not be so afraid. However, other than him, there was also the Iron Sword Gang that he and his brothers had painstakingly built and developed over the years. At present, the Iron Sword Gang's strength was far inferior to the Red-Clothed Association. Once a conflict broke out, it would be easily destroyed and everyone would die. With the fear in his heart, Han Yi could not say anything for a while. He was in a dilemma. On one hand, there was Chu Mu, whom he considered a friend. Although Han Yi had initially thought that Chu Mu had an extraordinary future and was worth investing in, he had a special characteristic. Once he considered someone a friend, he would be a friend. On the other hand, there was the Iron Sword Gang, which was closely related to his life. Between the two, he could only choose one. A hint of struggle flashed through his eyes. Han Yi already had an answer. He looked at Chu Mu with an apologetic gaze. Chu Mu faintly nodded his head. He expressed that he understood Han Ye's decision and could completely accept it. In the end, he and Han Yi had only met a few times, and hadn't reached the level where Han Yi would sacrifice his life to help him. Putting himself in Han Ye's shoes, Chu Mu believed that he himself could not do it. Since he could not do it, how could he ask others to do it? Han Yi had helped him several times, so Chu Mu had long regarded him as a person worth befriending. He also did not want Han Yi to provoke the Red-Clothed Association and lead to the destruction of the Iron Sword Gang. There will be plenty of time in the future. A look of relief flashed through Han Ye's eyes. He only said one sentence and then retreated. Everyone thought that Han Yi retreated out of fear, but Chu Mu heard a different meaning. Han Yi was telling him to sacrifice a temporary benefit in exchange for a safe life. There would be plenty of time in the future. Unfortunately, Chu Mu had his own plans. If he faced a strong enemy that he did not even have a glimmer of hope to fight back, he might find a chance to retreat. There would truly be plenty of time in the future. However, these two swordsmen with the consummation of Qi transformation were nothing in Chu Mu's eyes. Even if it was the Red-Cloved Association, Chu Mu was not afraid. Chief Han is indeed smart. Now it's time to see if you are smart or not. The red-cloved swordsman nodded in satisfaction. He looked at Chu Mu with a cold smile. Remember, be a smart person in your next life, Chu Mu said to the two red-cloved swordsmen with a smile on his face. The two red-cloved swordsmen and the surrounding people were stunned when they heard this. For a moment they did not react. Soon after, they vaguely saw a blurry sword light flicker before disappearing in the blink of an eye. It was like an illusion. After a full 3 breaths, the swordsman finally reacted. Even Han Yi was the same. They only saw a moon-white figure gradually disappear into the distance. While they were very confused, someone suddenly let out a cry filled with fear. They saw a conspicuous flower of blood appear on the throats of the two red-clothed swordsmen. These two red-clothed swordsmen's eyes still carried a bit of confusion. Their bodies swayed, and then they directly fell backwards. As the dust flew, Han Yi could foresee that the demon-shaking city would become even more chaotic. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 4:13. Swords are weapons, and swordsmanship is the art of killing. This was Chu Mu's philosophy. Even if he did not kill the two red-clothed swordsmen, they would still continue to pester him. Even if Chu Mu left, they would still find ways to find him. At that time, it would not only be the two of them, but many more members of the Red-Clothed Association. Since he would have to kill them sooner or later, why not kill them now? Chu Mu's sword was too fast. Even Han Yi, who was at the peak of the Qi transformation realm and was about to break through to the Qi high realm, could not see it clearly, let alone the others. The two red-clothed swordsmen did not even have time to react before their throats were pierced by Chu Mu's sword. The insides of their necks had already been destroyed, and it was not visible from the outside. Originally, Chu Mu had wanted to quickly search their bodies, but he did not find anything useful. He only found 2 high-grade swords. It seemed that the low-grade spirit stones they brought to buy the wind-winged devil dragon were with the third red-clothed swordsman, but he did not know where he went. As one of the 3 major powers in the Demon Shaker City, the Red-Clothed Association rarely died in the Demon Shaker City. It could be said that this had not happened in the past 5 years. The death of the 2 red-clothed swordsmen would definitely cause the Red-Clothed Association to be furious, and chaos would be unavoidable. As the fuse, Chu Mu did not know anything about it. He was on his way to the Wild Lion Association. By now, Chu Mu had already understood the distribution of the various powers in the Demon Shaker City. He knew the location of the Wild Lion Association very well. After a while, Chu Mu arrived in front of the Wild Lion Association. It was a manor that occupied a large area. On the closed red door, there was a sculpture of a mighty lion. It was so lifelike that it looked as if it would jump out of the door at any moment. On the left and right sides of the door, there was a middle-aged man with a sword on his back. They were both at the Qi transformation realm. There were also 2 majestic stone lions. On the plaque above the gate, there were 2 large golden words, Mad Lion, filled with domineering aura. Chu Mu didn't stop. He strode towards the main gate of the Wild Lion Gang. The 2 swordsmen who were guarding the gate immediately looked at him. Their eyes were as big as copper bells, they flickered with a sharp light, giving people an extremely strong pressure. "Stop!" one of them shouted. Chu Mu acted as if he didn't hear them and continued to walk forward. The 2 men immediately drew their swords and stared at Chu Mu with murderous intent. They shouted, "Who are you? What business do you have with the Mad Lion Gang? They hadn't received any notice that an important figure was coming today. In addition, the sword chi fluctuation that Chu Mu displayed was only that of chi transforming Deshang. It would be strange if they didn't intercept him. Murder, Chu Mu replied softly. The two swordsmen narrowed their eyes and waved their hands. Their swords immediately slashed towards Chu Mu from the left and right. The two swords crossed and collided. Before they could react, Chu Mu flicked out two strands of sword chi from his left hand. In an instant, they pierced through the throats of the two swordsmen, killing them. The two swordsmen's eyes were wide open and full of confusion. Their bodies softly fell to the ground. Chu Mu's palm slammed onto the thick vermilion door. With a pring sound, the door instantly split apart and flew inwards. It wasn't until it landed a dozen meters away that it let out a loud bang. Who is it? Behind the gate was a spacious front yard, and there were people practicing their swordsmanship. The huge commotion immediately interrupted them, causing them to turn around abruptly. They saw a moon-white figure walking through the broken gate with an indifferent expression. They also saw the two fallen swordsmen by the gate. They were already dead. Who are you? Why did you kill our gang's people and destroy our gate? If you don't give a reason, don't even think about leaving this place alive. One of the chi transforming Deshang swordsmen walked towards Chu Mu. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he pointed his sword at Chu Mu. The other swordsman also walked over and surrounded Chu Mu. Tell Li Guangshi to come out. Chu Mu stopped and said indifferently. He was not affected by the killing intent at all. Take him down. The chi transforming Deshang swordsman shouted angrily. More than 10 chi transforming swordsmen moved one after another, stabbing or slashing towards Chu Mu. This was the Wild Lion Gang's manner, so they weren't restricted by the Demon Shaking City's rule of not being able to use sword chi. The rule of not being able to use sword chi was to avoid unnecessary casualties or causing more grievances. However, this rule didn't apply to any gang's territory. In any case, the people who died wouldn't be unrelated to them. Therefore, the moment the Wild Lion Gang's swordsmen attacked, sword chi whistled and sword light flickered. It was as if they wanted to cut Chu Mu into pieces. Get lost! With a light shout, Chu Mu revealed a trace of perfect sword aura. That terrifying sword aura was like a mountain of swords descending and crushing everything. Even the chi transforming Deshang swordsman couldn't resist it and knelt on the ground in an instant. Needless to say, the other swordsmen couldn't even hold on to their swords as they knelt down. They were all extremely shocked. Li Guangshi, I'll give you 3 breaths of time. If you don't come out, I'll remove your Wild Lion Gang from the list. Chu Mu let out a soft shout. His voice resounded through the 9 heavens like rolling thunder, instantly filling the entire Wild Lion Gang's manor. A trace of sword aura was fused into it, causing the shout to have an extremely terrifying aura. Even the chi transforming peak swordsman couldn't resist it. Inside the training room, Li Guangshi's body was trembling violently. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned pale. His eyes contained a trace of fear, anger, and hatred. He was trying to break through to the Chi High Realm and had reached the most crucial point. He was just one step away from breaking through. He didn't expect Chu Mu to shout at this moment. If it was just a normal shout, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, this shout contained 1% of perfect sword aura. The meaning was completely different. His mind was shaken and his breakthrough state was immediately destroyed. His entire essence, chi, and soul were greatly affected. Not only were his internal organs injured, but his meridians were also injured. Even his mind was injured. This kind of injury would take at least half a year to recover, unless he had some kind of treasure. The hatred in Li Guangshi's heart was like a torrential river. He wanted to take out his sword and kill the person who had just spoken. He wanted to cut him into pieces. Unfortunately, he didn't dare. Although he was domineering, he wasn't an idiot. Just a voice alone contained such a powerful aura. How strong would the real person be? It was definitely not someone he could fight against right now. He quickly took a healing pill and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Li Guangshi stood up and walked out of the training room with his sword. Who are you? What is your purpose in coming to our gang? A large number of swordsmen had gathered in the front yard of the Wild Lion Gang. Among them, there were more than 40 swordsmen wearing golden robes. Each of them was emitting chi transforming peak swordsmen. They were the Golden Lion sword guards of the Wild Lion Gang. The person who spoke was also wearing a golden robe. He looked to be in his 40s. The sword chi he emitted was at the peak of the chi high realm. He was very close to breaking through to the small chi high realm. He looked at Chu Mu with a face full of fear and asked in a deep voice, "Who is Li Guangshi?" Chu Mu didn't answer, he only asked calmly. The peak of the chi high realm swordsman's veins bulged out from his forehead. His eyes were filled with anger and killing intent. "I am." A calm and domineering voice sounded out. A tall and strong figure walked out from the main hall with big step. It was Li Guangshi. His face was still pale, but his expression was gloomy. He stared at Chu Mu and asked, "Who are you? What kind of grudge do you have with our gang? Why are you here to cause trouble?" 2 months ago you sent people to kill me, Chu Mu said calmly. Li Guangshi's expression changed. He looked at Chu Mu carefully and compared him to 2 months ago. "You are the one who was targeted by Slaughterer?" The Wild Lion Gang has 2 choices. Chu Mu's words were equivalent to admitting Li Guangshi's words. First, give me a suitable compensation that satisfies me, and this matter will end here. Second, use my sword to bury the Wild Lion Gang. The moment he finished speaking, Chu Mu unsheathed his sword. His sword was like a falling star. A terrifying aura of sharpness emanated outwards. Everywhere it passed, the air seemed to be dispelled, creating a pseudo-vacuum. The surrounding swordsmen all felt it was difficult to breathe. Everyone, including the peak of the Chi High Realm swordsmen, were shocked. Under this powerful aura they all felt small. The Chu Mu in front of them seemed to have turned into a giant, an existence that they couldn't fight against. The swordsmen of the Wild Lion Gang all looked at Li Guangshi. They all followed Li Guangshi's lead. As long as Li Guangshi gave the order, even if it was an enemy they couldn't fight against, they would still fight to the death. Li Guangshi was the first to bear the brunt. This pressure almost made him kneel down on the spot. If it wasn't for the fact that he had cultivated his aura for a long time, he would have made a fool out of himself. His expression kept changing. He clenched his teeth and was filled with anger and unwillingness. He wanted to order everyone to attack and kill Chu Mu right here in the Wild Lion Gang. He didn't dare, he really didn't dare. This person's aura was too strong, and there was no way they could fight against it. Under this situation, even if they killed Chu Mu in the end, there wouldn't be many people left in the Wild Lion Gang. "How much compensation do you think is appropriate?" Li Guangshi let out a breath. It was as heavy as a bellows. 5 million low-rank soul stones, Chu Mu said without thinking. The surrounding swordsmen's faces changed, and their pupils contracted. Li Guangshi's veins were bulging, and he almost pulled out his sword to fight for his life. At most 2 million. Otherwise, the Wild Lion Gang doesn't mind fighting to the death. Li Guangshi gritted his teeth and growled like a wounded beast. This is the only time. If there is a next time, the Wild Lion Gang will be wiped out by my sword, Chu Mu said lightly. Li Guangshi didn't say anything. Instead, he ordered someone to bring over 20 low-rank soul stones cards. With a wave of his hand, the 20 low-rank soul stones cards shot towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu waved his sleeve, and the 20 low-rank soul stones cards disappeared in the blink of an eye. He sheathed his sword and glanced at Li Guangshi. Then, he turned around and left in big strides, leaving behind a group of Wild Lion Gang members who hated him to the bone. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 4:14. Chief. One of the elders of the Wild Lion Gang opened his mouth. Li Guangshi immediately raised his hand to stop him. He looked at the peak of Qi High Swordsman with a gloomy face and said, Leader Li, what is this person's cultivation level? It should be above mine. It is very likely that he is at the Qi High level. Deshang's sword Qi is probably at the peak of Qi High level. The leader of the Golden Lion Sword Guards said in a serious tone, I feel that even if we use all of our power, we will not be able to do anything to this person. If they were to fight head-on, they might be able to kill Chu Mu. But don't forget that Chu Mu was a single person. He would not just stand there and do nothing. Once he started to move, the battle would become more and more complex. In the end, the Wild Lion Gang would be destroyed. The surrounding swordsmen were all silent. Their faces were gloomy like dark clouds. They had anger in their hearts that they could not vent. Chief, are we just going to let it go like this? One of the elders said angrily. Ever since the establishment of the gang, we have never been humiliated like this. 2 million low-rank spirit stones is a small matter. The reputation of the gang is more important. Once this news gets out, the reputation of the gang will fall. What is Leader Wang's opinion? Li Guangshi's face was gloomy as he asked lightly. His voice contained the power of a storm. Hire someone to kill him. Leader Wang said word by word. The killing intent in his eyes was almost tangible. This person is targeted by the Void Butcher. We cannot do anything, but that does not mean that others cannot. If we take out enough spirit stones to hire the demon sword Ghost Fog to kill him, even the Void Butcher will not be able to do anything to him. Alright, I have my own plans for this matter. Let's end it here. Li Guangshi waved his hand and turned to leave, leaving behind a tall and sturdy figure. That's right, if Chu Mu died under the demon sword Ghost Fog's sword, then the Void Slaughterer wouldn't be able to do anything to the demon sword Ghost Fog. However, if the Void Slaughterer knew that the Wild Lion Gang was the one who hired the assassin, then the Wild Lion Gang would definitely be slaughtered by the Void Slaughterer. Similar things had happened before. Right now, there were so many people here. Although they were all members of the Wild Lion Gang, the more people there were, the more secrets there would be. Even if Li Guangshi was very willing, he didn't dare to take this risk. The income of 2 million low-grade spirit stones immediately alleviated Chu Mu's urgent need of spirit stones, and he let out a sigh of relief. Striding out of the Wild Lion Gang, Chu Mu wasn't worried about the Wild Lion Gang's revenge at all. The moment the Wild Lion Gang made a move against him, what awaited them would be Chu Mu's storm-like counterattack until they were annihilated. The first plan had been completed, but the second plan couldn't be implemented at the moment because Chu Mu didn't know where Mr. Yun was. After thinking for a bit, Chu Mu decided to return to the Windward Tavern first and use a few days to cultivate the muscle chapter of the Sky Desolate Sword Physique before proceeding to the next step of the experiential learning. Walking on the street, Chu Mu suddenly saw more than 10 red-robed swordsmen walking in the middle of the street. The surrounding swordsmen all made way for them. They were members of the Red-Clothed Association. Chu Mu's gaze swept across the red-robed swordsmen and landed on 2 figures that were surrounded by the red-robed swordsmen. An old man and a young man. These 2 people were the grandfather and grandson of the O clan that Chu Mu had saved on his way to the Chaos Demon original road. The 2 of them looked very miserable. Their hands and feet were chained, and every step they took would cause the sound of the chains clashing against each other. Especially the old man, his injuries hadn't healed, and his aura was weak like a candle in the wind, as if it would be extinguished at any moment. The old man and the young man hung their heads dejectedly. They had been on the run for many years, and had escaped from the tiger's den into the wolf's den. In the end, they couldn't avoid being captured. Chu Mu sighed softly, and couldn't help but be moved in his heart. Since the last time he had used his sword to save the grandfather and grandson, there had been a trace of involvement between them. If Chu Mu had left the demon-shaking city and the Chaos Demon original road, he might not have met them again. However, since Chu Mu had encountered them now, and they were from the Red Clothed Association, which had a conflict with him, Chu Mu had no reason to stand by and do nothing. The thought of using his sword to save the grandfather and grandson subconsciously appeared in his heart. Chu Mu didn't forcibly suppress this thought, and strode to the middle of the street, blocking the path of the red-robed swordsman. The Red Clothed Association is handling matters. Unrelated people, make way. The leader of the red-robed swordsmen sternly shouted. He had the sword chi of the chi transformation realm. You make way immediately. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. The swordsmen of the Red Clothed Association pointed at Chu Mu and angrily shouted. Their expressions were stern and full of threat. Leave the two of them behind. You can all scram. Chu Mu's face was calm as he spoke, neither slowly nor quickly. The surrounding people were all shocked. They thought that he had gone crazy, daring to confront the people of the Red Clothed Association. The red-robed swordsmen were all startled. Then, as if they had encountered an incomparably funny matter, they began to laugh loudly. The grandfather and grandson of the O clan also heard this voice. They raised their heads with difficulty and looked over. When they saw Chu Mu, their eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. They didn't recognize Chu Mu. A mere chi transformation Deshang. Kill him. The chi transformation realm red-robed swordsman waved his hand and said incomparably coldly. In an instant, two people rushed out from the left and right. They drew their swords on the way and stabbed out. The two swords turned into red lightning that pierced towards Chu Mu. They wanted to pierce through Chu Mu's body, but they suddenly missed. The two people couldn't stop themselves from rushing forward a few meters and directly falling down. Blood quickly flowed out from their throats and dyed the ground red. No one saw how Chu Mu attacked. They only vaguely saw two red-robed swordsmen rush towards Chu Mu and pass by Chu Mu's left and right. They directly fell forward and bled to their death. It looked so inconceivable. The moment the two red-robed swordsmen fell, Chu Mu moved. His dreamlike footwork rushed into the midst of the red-robed swordsmen in an instant. Everyone faintly saw a sharp and blurry sword light flicker like an illusion. The red-robed swordsman's eyes were filled with bewilderment and confusion. Immediately after, there was a chi-chi-chi sound. Flowers of blood bloomed from their throats and arrows of blood shot out. The bodies of the red-robed swordsmen swayed and softly fell to the ground. Even when they died, they didn't have time to react. Chu Mu's speed was too fast and the gap between them was too big. Immediately after, another blurry sword light flickered. Everyone only heard an obscure clanging sound. The chains on the hands and feet of the old man and the young man were cut. The cut was incomparably smooth and could almost be used as a mirror. Let's go. Chu Mu glanced at the O family's grandfather and grandson and indifferently said. The old man and the young man hadn't completely reacted. Their faces were filled with bewilderment and confusion. When they heard Chu Mu's words, they were suddenly startled. They quickly reacted and hurriedly stepped forward to follow Chu Mu. However, they were all injured. In addition to various other reasons, they walked very slowly. It was quite difficult for them to walk as they staggered. No one dared to obstruct them. All the swordsmen automatically made way for Chu Mu's group to pass. It didn't matter whether this person would eventually die under the revenge of the Red-Robed Association. At least for now, he was an extremely fierce and terrifying person. He didn't even put the Red-Robed Association in his eyes. If he wanted to kill someone, he would kill them without the slightest hesitation. The O family's grandfather and grandson followed closely behind Chu Mu and arrived at the Windward Tavern after a long period of time. They didn't know who Chu Mu was. They didn't know what Chu Mu's identity was. They also didn't know what Chu Mu's purpose was in saving them. However, they had no choice but to follow Chu Mu. They had no one to rely on and they were very weak. Chu Mu was the one who had saved them. It was as if he had stretched out a hand to grab them when they were about to fall into the abyss of despair. He had pulled them up. Therefore, they chose to believe in Chu-mu. This was a kind of helpless choice when they were at the end of their rope. Chu-mu spent some low-grade spirit stones to open a guest room for the grandfather and grandson pair. He let them stay in the room and tidied it up. He also asked the waiter to deliver some food and drinks to them. After doing all this, Chu-mu didn't care anymore. Instead, he stayed in his room and quietly cultivated. He took the ancient desolate pill to temper his muscles. In another guest room, the O family's grandfather and grandson pair were eating food. The youth looked like a reincarnated hungry ghost because they hadn't eaten for several days. They were almost starving to death. If it wasn't for their injuries and lack of food, they wouldn't have been so easily found and captured by the Red-Robed Association. Now there was nothing to say. In the end, they were still captured. If it wasn't for Chu-mu's help, they would have been brought back to the Red-Robed Association and become prisoners. At that time, what kind of fate would be waiting for them? They couldn't be sure. They could only guess that it would be terrible. Perhaps it would be a dead end. Grandfather, eat this. It's delicious. The O family's youth pushed the delicious food in front of the O family's old man while eating. You eat. Grandfather can't eat that much. Although the O family's old man also wanted to open his mouth and eat wildly, he was old and heavily injured. If it wasn't for him forcefully suppressing it, he was afraid that it would explode and take his old life. Even now, he was forcefully suppressing his heavy injuries and barely moving. He was like a candle in the wind. The O family's youth was starving. He kept eating and almost choked. The O family's old man was slowly chewing and thinking with a serious expression. He knew his own body's condition. However, the O family couldn't be without descendants. Therefore, he could die, but his grandson must live. Otherwise, the O family would be completely gone. He was also very clear that whether the O family would be without descendants was no longer up to him. Instead, it was up to the person who saved them. If he was willing to help, perhaps the O family wouldn't be without descendants. Thinking of this, the O family's old man couldn't eat anymore and immediately stood up. Grandfather, why aren't you eating? What are you doing? The O family's youth was startled and quickly asked. I'll Luo go out with grandfather. You can eat later, the O family's old man said. He coughed a few times and walked towards the door. When he opened the door, the O family's youth immediately thought of his grandfather's plan. So, he immediately stood up and walked out of the door. Their guest room wasn't far from Chu-mu's guest room. It was only a few steps away. So, they quickly arrived in front of Chu-mu's room. Then, they raised their hands and knocked on the door. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 4:15. Chu-mu stopped cultivating. His body didn't move. He shot out sword energy with one hand. The sword energy was very ingenious after it was shot out. It opened the door bolt without damaging it. Other swordsmen would have been shocked if they had seen this. What precise control of sword energy! This required not only a pure sword energy, but also sufficient control of sword energy. It also required an incomparably strong will. The majority of swordsmen couldn't achieve this. The old man and the young man of the O clan were somewhat nervous after the door was opened. They took a deep breath and stepped into Chu-mu's room. Thank you for saving us. Old man O bowed to Chu-mu as soon as he entered the room. The young man of the O clan knelt down and kowtowed. It was as if he had been given a new life. Get up. I didn't expect to see you here, Chu-mu said with a faint smile. Old man O and the young man of the O clan were startled. They had heard Chu-mu's words. It wasn't the first time he had seen them. Old man O's eyes flashed with excitement. He didn't dare to be sure. You are the young man of the O clan's eyes also lit up because he had also thought of something. It's me, Chu-mu nodded and admitted bluntly. It's really you. Old man O had changed the way he addressed Chu-mu from you to. This change showed his deep gratitude and respect for Chu Mu. Twice. The two of them had already been saved by Chu Mu twice. Moreover, after learning that Chu Mu was that person from last time, they had relaxed. Subconsciously. "Sit down," Chu Mu said. The O clan's grandfather and grandson sat down on a chair. They told Chu Mu what had happened after that. It turned out that this pair of grandfather and grandson had actually followed Chu Mu all the way to the Demon Shaker City. However, Chu Mu's speed was too fast. One of them was injured, so his speed was very slow. Coupled with the pursuit of the Red Coat Association, they had no choice but to take a long detour. In the end, he was unable to escape the Red Coat Association's pursuit. He fell into the hands of the members of the Red Coat Association and was brought to Demon Shaker City. He had originally despaired, but he did not expect to coincidentally bump into Chu Mu. Once again, he was saved by Chu Mu. In fact, if the other two first-rate forces other than the Red Coat Association had captured the grandfather and grandson of the O family, Chu Mu might not have done anything. There were some factors involved in offending the Red Coat Association. There was no need to find trouble and offend other first-rate forces. It had to be said that the O family's grandfather and grandson were very unlucky. They actually followed Chu Mu and ended up being captured by the Red Coat Association. Their luck was also very good as they met Chu Mu again. "Benefactor, I know that you look down on the O family's heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. However, I am unable to repay the favor of saving my life twice," the old man of the O family said with an incomparably emotional tone. He coughed a few times. Chu Mu could see that his injuries were extremely serious. He was completely forcefully holding on. The young man of the O family quickly used his palm to stroke the old man's back. Chu Mu did not say anything. He had saved people based on his own heart. He did not care about repayment. Of course, the repayment that Chu Mu wanted the most was a sword-forging grandmaster to forge his desolate sky sword. Old Master O's hand trembled as he reached into his bosom. After a while, he took out a very thin piece of paper and handed it to Chu Mu. "Grandfather." The young man of the O family's pupils immediately contracted when he saw the piece of paper. Chu Mu glanced at Old Master O and took the paper. His gaze fell on that piece of paper. He took a look and saw that the entire piece of paper was filled with densely packed words. It looked very strange. It would easily cause people to have a feeling of confusion and dizziness. Chu Mu quickly withdrew his gaze. Only then did the dizziness disappear. His heart was very surprised and had a trace of fear. "Benefactor, this piece of paper recorded the O family's heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique." Old Master O forcibly stopped coughing. He used an incomparably cautious tone and solemnly stared at Chu Mu. He said, "Ever since the O family was annihilated, I have been carrying this piece of paper and fleeing with all Luo. Other than the patriarch of each generation and the inheritor of the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique, no one else knew that the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was recorded on this piece of paper." Chu Mu's expression went blank. Now that she said it, this heaven-shaking fusion energy forging sword technique was truly mysterious. Originally, Chu Mu only thought that the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was an amazing sword forging technique. But now, it seemed that there was another secret. Otherwise, the O family wouldn't be so cautious. Rumor has it that the ancestors of the O family actually came from the central main sword domain. Old Master O said again. Revealing a big secret made Chu Mu dizzy. Even the young man of the O family was very shocked. It seemed that he didn't know. If the ancestors of the O family came from the central main sword domain, then this heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was very likely to come from the central main sword domain. To many swordsmen, the central main sword domain was a paradise for the way of the sword. It was a place that people yearned for. The items that were produced in the central main sword domain would often be automatically shrouded in a mysterious halo. The history of the O family's ancestors can no longer be investigated. The only thing that has been passed down is this piece of paper. The heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique recorded on it is actually only a fragment. Old Master O continued, "This is the heirloom of the O family. It is also the only proof that the O family recognizes its ancestors. Our O family's ancestors had a wish, and that was to recognize their ancestors. But now it is impossible. This thing is the source of a disaster. Because of it, the O family was exterminated. Only the two of us are left. We fled here for a few years." Old Master O coughed again while speaking. This time, he actually coughed up blood. "Old Master, you should rest first. Recuperate from your injuries first," Chumu promptly said. No need. I know my own injuries. I won't be able to hold on until today." Old Master O wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and looked at Chumu with pleading eyes. He continued, "With Benefactor's intelligence, you already know what this old man means. The O family's heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique will be given to you. This old man earnestly asks Benefactor to take Aluo in. If Benefactor feels that Aluo is a burden, then arrange a place for Aluo so that he can live peacefully for the rest of his life." Old Master O coughed again while speaking. This time, he coughed up even more blood. The O family's youngster sobbed. "Because I have always hidden this piece of paper inside my robe, it is very well hidden. The people of the Red Cloved Association didn't find it at all. They took away my spatial bracelet and thought that the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was hidden inside." Old Master O sat down with the help of the O family's youngster. "Even if we continue to stay here, we will only bring disaster upon ourselves. Benefactor is young and has extraordinary strength. You must have a great origin. You also have enough strength to protect this heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique." Chumu didn't agree immediately because of Old Master O's injuries. He was thinking because this was related to a lot of things. The matter was very obvious. If he agreed to Old Master O's request, then the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique would be his. In fact, Chumu was very interested in this heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. It should be said that this piece of paper had aroused his curiosity. With Chumu's strength, now that this piece of paper was in his hands, he could take it for himself and deal with the O family's grandfather and grandson. However, his sword path and sword heart didn't allow him to do so. He didn't even think about it. Two choices were placed in front of Chumu. First, if he agreed to Old Master O's request, he could obtain this piece of paper. However, the conflict between him and the Red Cloved Association would intensify again. He might even provoke some more powerful forces and cause endless trouble. Of course, this was only a guess. Perhaps other than the Red Cloved Association, no other forces knew. In addition, he had to settle down the young man from the O family. This was also a neither big nor small troublesome matter. Second, he had to return this piece of paper to Old Master O and let them leave. After that, the so-called heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique would have nothing to do with him. Of course, the conflict between him and the Red Cloved Association would still exist and still had to be resolved. Old Master O's coughs continuously sounded. After a full 10 breaths, Chumu made a decision. "I agree," Chumu said indifferently and put the piece of paper into his interspatial bracelet. At the same time, Old Master O spat out a mouthful of blood and completely dyed the ground in front of him red. His face instantly turned pale, but he revealed a gratified expression as if he had been relieved of a burden. It was as if he had put down a burden. He looked at Chumu with eyes full of gratitude and then looked at the sobbing young man from the O family. He raised a trembling hand and gently stroked the young man's head. "Aluo, you'll follow your benefactor in the future. You have to accept whatever arrangements he makes." Aluo nodded repeatedly and could not say a word. Chumu did not say a word. He looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. He could see that old Master O's injuries were very serious. Even if he took out a pill, he would not be able to heal him unless he had some kind of rare treasure. However, rare treasures were things that could only be encountered by chance. Even if there were clues, there was no place to find them. Old Master O also could not let go of his grandson, so he relied on his willpower to hold on until now. Now that Chu Mu had agreed, his grandson's safety was finally guaranteed in the future. He could finally be at ease. Once he relaxed, he could not suppress his injuries and vomited blood and died. Suddenly, the whole room was filled with a sorrowful aura. A dead person can't be brought back to life. My condolences. Chu Mu sighed softly and said, Your grandfather's biggest wish is that you can live on. As long as you live on and live well, it will be your grandfather's greatest reward. Chu Mu did not know why, but he felt very uncomfortable in his heart after he said this. He got up and walked to the door. After he opened it, he walked out and closed the door. He left the space for the young man from the O family. If the young man from the O family committed suicide because of this, it would have nothing to do with Chu Mu. After all, it was impossible for Chu Mu to pay attention to him all the time. He could only bear everything by himself, straighten it out, and then become strong. As the door was closed, the sobbing sound gradually became softer and disappeared. Chu Mu strolled along the corridor on the third floor of the inn. He was walking aimlessly. Even he did not know why he was doing this. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 4:16. The full name of the young man from the O clan was O Chengluo. He was 15 years old this year, and his cultivation base was at the 8th level of the Sword Chi realm. With such a cultivation base, he was definitely a cultivation genius that was hard to come by in 100 years in the Green Edge Sword sect. In a place like the Demon Shaking City, he could also be considered a rare cultivation genius. Being able to cultivate didn't mean being able to fight. They were two different concepts. Often, those who cultivated quickly would die in the hands of those who cultivated slowly because they weren't good at fighting. Or it could be said that they lacked rich experience in life and death battles. O Chengluo had been living in the O clan since he was young. He was protected by the clan. Normally, he would cultivate and practice his forging skills. He didn't have any combat experience at all. After the O clan was exterminated, he was brought away by old Master O to escape from the desolate border city. They experienced many dangers, but those dangers were beyond O Chengluo's tolerance. O Chengluo deeply felt how weak he was. If he was strong enough, then the O clan wouldn't have been exterminated. His grandfather wouldn't have been severely injured and died from the pursuit. None of the tragedies would have happened. Strength. Everything was related to strength. His grandfather's death was a huge blow to O Chengluo. However, the years of escaping had forged his tenacious will and temperament. He also deeply understood that only by living well and continuing the O clan's bloodline would he be able to repay his grandfather. Therefore, after a day, O Chengluo broke away from his sorrow. At least on the surface, he seemed to have broken away from his sorrow. However, Chu Mu could see that in his eyes, there was a trace of deep sorrow that was engraved in his heart. Chu Mu took out some spirit stones and cremated old Master O's body in the Demon Shaking City's funeral hall. O Chengluo put the ashes into an urn and wrapped the urn with a piece of cloth. In a place like the Demon Shaking City, death could be seen everywhere. Some people died without a burial place, and some people couldn't find a place to bury their dead even if they wanted to. Burials were not allowed in the city, and burials outside the city could be destroyed, causing the deceased to not be able to rest in peace. As a result, the funeral parlors were born, and their business was quite good. After O Chengluo put away the urn, he stood in front of Chu Mu and stared at him. Suddenly, he knelt down and kowtowed to Chu Mu. Big Brother Chu, thank you, thank you. It's nothing, Chu Mu said indifferently. Big Brother Chu, I want to be strong, strong as you. O Chengluo was still kneeling, but he straightened his back. His eyes were bloodshot, carrying traces of hatred and killing intent. He was like a desperate wolf, choosing to devour its prey. That kind of ruthlessness that came from the depths of his heart made people shudder. Big Brother Chu, take me as your disciple. I want to become even stronger. O Chengluo didn't wait for Chu Mu's reply and directly kowtowed 3 times. The skin on his forehead split open and was covered with blood. I can give you pointers on cultivation and swordsmanship, but I won't take you as my disciple. Chu Mu was surprised by the hatred in O Chengluo's eyes, but he said calmly, You only have hatred in your heart now. This will be very helpful for your cultivation in the early stages, but if you keep using hatred in your heart to cultivate, you will lose yourself in the future. O Chengluo seemed to be listening to Chu Mu's words seriously, but his expression didn't change. He still couldn't understand the meaning of Chu Mu's words. In short, I won't take you as my disciple, but I can give you pointers on your cultivation, and I can also arrange a place for you to go. Chu Mu continued, I promised your grandfather that I would arrange a stable second half for you so that you could settle down and live your life. Now it seems that you have made your own choice. I won't forcefully interfere with your decision. As long as you remember one thing, no matter what decision you make, the final outcome should be borne by you, because that is your choice, your path. For the first time, Chu Mu said so much because he took that piece of paper and agreed to Old Master O's conditions. Otherwise, he couldn't be bothered to care about what O Chengluo would become. As for taking him as a disciple, Chu Mu didn't have any thoughts about it at all. Thinking about it, his current strength might be very strong, but that was only targeted. He was still not strong enough to face a sword grandmaster, so his path was still very long, and he hadn't developed to a limit yet. He himself needed to make more progress, so how could he take him as a disciple? As for giving pointers on cultivation and swordsmanship, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't the first time Chu Mu had done such things. Chu Mu's promise to give him pointers made O Chengluo very excited, and he quickly immersed himself in cultivation. He seemed to want to use endless cultivation to numb the pain in his heart, and use the endless hatred to stimulate the desire to cultivate. That kind of drive made Chu Mu very shocked, and persuasion had no effect. The effect was very obvious. 3 days later, O Chengluo's sword chi cultivation broke through to the 9th stage of sword chi, and his swordsmanship also improved a lot under Chu Mu's guidance. Similarly, Chu Mu's heavenly desolate sword physique was also completed. 10 ancient heavenly desolate pills were consumed, and there were only 5 left. In the guest room, Chu Mu's moon-white robe was shattered due to the tyrannical strength of his muscles. Chu Mu stood naked in the guest room, and every inch of his skin had turned yellowish-brown, covered with black cracks that spread all over his body. No, if one looked carefully, they would discover that the yellowish-brown color was the color of the muscles under the skin, and those black cracks were also the cracks of the muscles under the skin. However, they appeared through the skin, as if they were directly born on the skin. A strange aura was emitted from the muscles under Chu Mu's skin, and it pervaded the surroundings, causing the air to be filled with a strange smell. This kind of aura was indescribable, and it was very strange. Fortunately, there was only Chu Mu in the guest room at this time. O Chengluo was in another guest room, and he was also cultivating at this time. After a full 10 breaths, the black cracks on the skin disappeared in the blink of an eye. The yellowish-brown luster also quickly receded, and the skin once again returned to its original color. From the looks of it, Chu Mu's body didn't change much compared to before. Only some slight changes made his body look more charming, and it was filled with an incomparably powerful explosive force. Once that explosive force was released, it would be like a 100-year-old volcano, incomparably terrifying. Chu Mu raised both of his hands, opened his palms in front of his eyes, and carefully examined them. There was some joy in his eyes. He could clearly feel the strength of his body, and the incomparably terrifying power flowing in his body was at least 10 times stronger than before. 10 times the strength. He clenched his fist, and in an instant, a sharp sound of air exploding rang out, as if a huge firecracker had suddenly exploded. A strong air current rushed out from the left and right sides of his fist, making a whistling sound. He punched out, using 60% of his strength. The terrifying sound of air exploding suddenly rang out, and it was so sharp that it almost pierced the eardrums. One could only vaguely see a vague shadow of a fist and a transparent cone that seemed to have pierced through the air, piercing forward. Punching and kicking, Chu Mu turned into a phantom, and moved around the spacious guest room. His speed was unbelievably fast, and wherever he passed, a burst of strong air currents formed into a whistling wind, blowing the curtains in the guest room, and the fragments of the white robe on the ground also danced with the wind, like graceful butterflies. Chu Mu seemed to have turned into a small tornado, and with a terrifying destructive force, it swept through the entire guest room. After a full quarter of an hour, Chu Mu finally stopped. He was not out of breath, his heartbeat was not accelerating, and there was not a single drop of sweat on his body. On the contrary, the muscles all over his body were slightly jumping because of the movement just now, as if they had a unique life force, which was very astonishing. The Sky Wasteland sword body is indeed a tyrannical sword body comparable to the top Xiantian sword body. The Viscera chapter, Blood chapter, Bones chapter, Meridians chapter, and Muscle chapter, and the Blood chapter have not been completely completed, but now my body has become very strong from the inside out. Chu Mu secretly said. The 7 chapters of the Sky Wasteland sword body, each chapter was a kind of strengthening of the body. From the internal organs to the outermost hair, Chu Mu had strengthened the muscles. It could be said that Chu Mu had already cultivated the Sky Wasteland sword body to the level of Deshang. Next, as long as he finished cultivating the skin and hair, the Sky Wasteland sword body would be cultivated to perfection. Chu Mu did not know if there would be any other changes after cultivating the 6th and 7th chapters, besides being able to cultivate the Sky Wasteland sword chi, but at least until now, he had finished cultivating the muscle chapter, and his body had become 10 times stronger than before. 10 times, maybe the concept was not clear, but for Chu Mu's overall strength, it was a very obvious increase. It could at least increase his strength by 2 times. Chu Mu was 100% sure that he could win. Currently, he did not need to use any of his sword aura, mental state, or sword force. He only needed to rely on his body and his sword techniques to fight against a normal initial Qi high-stage sword artist. This was not arrogance, but a confidence that came from his own strength. Taking out a low-grade spirit stone, Chu Mu stretched out a finger and caught the low-grade spirit stone. In an instant, his finger vibrated at a high frequency and pressed on the low-grade spirit stone. A strange sound was heard, and the low-grade spirit stone, which was as hard as a low-grade sword, was shattered into pieces in the blink of an eye. It turned into dust and splashed everywhere, bringing with it a strand of pure spirit chi. The skin on Chu Mu's finger also exploded, but there was not a single drop of blood. The flesh under the skin had a yellowish-brown luster. It flashed by like an illusion, and the skin was recovering at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. With the completion of the muscle chapter, his body had become 10 times stronger. The stone-trembling power that had just reached the level of Deshang's had increased again. It was approaching the level of Deshang's peak, and its power had become even more terrifying. One finger was able to shatter a low-grade spirit stone. In other words, Chu Mu's finger could shatter a low-grade armor. Just thinking about such a power was enough to make one's blood run cold and their hair stand on end. After trying it out, Chu Mu knew how strong his body was. He stopped testing and took out a new set of clothes to wear. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.